Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the United States of a Movie podcast. We're the movie podcast that makes every Monday a fun day because we get together and we talk movies, but not randomly, much like we would, to be honest. But we do actually have a purpose here at the United States of a Movie because we're the movie podcast that's trying to find one movie to define each state in these United States. In fact, we've already finished our first road trip around all 50 states, and right now, in between our two seasons, we're doing a series of specials, a series of like trying to find the movies and explore the movies that we were talking about during the show. And this week, we're doing the United States of fictional cities. Ooh, we're going to places that don't even exist. And I have to be honest, it was quite the adventure. We had a good set of movies this week. Before we get to those, though, let's welcome back my amazing co-host, Ryan Sander, buddy. Welcome back to the show.
Great to be here. I just injected myself with the substance, and I regret to inform you that this is actually the better version of me. So,
ooh,
okay.
Yeah.
So, Ryan has been obsessed with the substance since he saw it. He has texted us at least a dozen times that we should see it. I think I may be the only person in the podcast this week that hasn't seen it, so we'll still probably get into it. But before we get there, oh wait, Will Hurst, you're not sitting in your video store in LA. You seem to be on top of a building.
Have you transcended?
Time stop. Oh wait, you guys are still moving. Okay, I must have lost my powers. I am fully engulfed in the megalon, in the megalopolis. That this is now my kingdom. This is now where I live. Francis is my boy. He is everything to me now. So you will now refer to me by my megalopolis name. I am Nero Bonkers. That is my new name. And I've just fully embraced the madness.
The only way we could get Will to stop mentioning CrossFit was for Megalopolis to come out.
It's now derailed. CrossFit doesn't even matter when you're constructing cities.
Well, Nero, welcome to the show. Happy to have you. Glad that you finally had to, you got to achieve completion by seeing Megalopolis because
the edging was getting out of control.
I've never seen.
This bit's been going on for way too long. Yeah, so
you should see all this.
So very quickly, Megalopolis. Did you like it? Was it good? Is it random?
Doesn't matter.
I don't know. I have no clue if I liked it or not. It was. I will say that the audience was definitely laughing at various points in the movie. Probably they weren't supposed to be laughing.
Was it a packed house?
It was pretty packed. I went to the Chinese theater to see it, and so it was definitely the best way to see it on that IMAX screen. But the audience, we were all kind of like, all right.
Yeah, that's okay.
John Travolta, Pulp Fiction, like they don't know what to do with themselves.
Yeah, it was something else. Let me tell you.
That's cool.
Wow. $110 million for people going, huh? But we actually also have a fourth guest. We have a fourth person here on the show today, invited in. Alexa. Alexa recommends on TikTok someone that loves movies as well, loves to talk about movies, but also with an interest towards the history behind, not just the movies, but also their connection to history. And I'm really excited to have her on the show. Alexa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here and to talk about these movies and, what they say about us as Americans. Or, I guess not you, but.
Right out of the gate, we're addressing. But actually, I was watching Alexa's face just then while Will was talking about Megalopolis. So, Alexa, have you seen Megalopolis as well?
Yeah, I went to go see it yesterday, and honestly, I felt similarly, where I felt like there were moments in the movie where I was like, okay, this old man is cooking. And then there were other times where I was like, I know what's happening in the plot, but I still feel like I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. A lot of like, I think I get it, but then, well, I don't even know where to begin.
The first thought that I had, though, that was so funny is I remember like I went to go see it yesterday. So on Thursday, I'd seen some tweets or whatever of talking about how after a special screening, Robert De Niro had went on like this lengthy rant about Donald Trump. And I was like, for what reason would he do that? But then I saw the movie and I was like, oh yeah, they hate him real bad. Like
Yeah.
like Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, and Robert De Niro are getting together on group chats and phone calls and
Yes.
talking about how much they hate this man.
Yeah.
Oh my
It's
God.
definitely, God, I want to see that group chat too, because it's very
Oh,
clear.
they're calling him names that verge on slurs. Like
Yeah.
they're
Very
saying,
much.
Wow, we're 5 minutes into the podcast and we're already talking slurs.
Yeah.
Well done, guys.
We did it. We got there.
And another thing about Mu Dang.
please let's not disparage
Yeah,
her.
just
I
kidding.
love her
Never.
so bad.
Yeah.
I can't wait
Never
for her
heard-
to eat somebody. It's gonna be great.
Yeah. Oh, then it's gonna be Harambe.
Oh wow, it took you this long?
I watch a lot of movies. All right, I don't have time for that.
He's getting injected with a substance. He doesn't have time for.
Yeah. I have
pop
7
culture
days, and
movies.
that's it.
Well, and that's like the thing. There was a great joke about how like they were like they injected Fiona the hippo with the substance and out came.
Huh.
Now it's all making sense.
Into it.
Oh my God! Oh, well, we've caught up with popular culture this week. Well done, guys. That was pretty good. So let's talk about the movies that we brought to the table this week. So, like I said, the assignment was sort of like a fictional city or a fictional version of a city in America, just so we could get a little bit interesting. And to kick things off, Alexa, why don't you talk about the movie that you brought to the table? Because this was an interesting one. This was quite an enjoyable watch.
Yeah.
Okay, so I picked Idlewild, which I'm glad I did because I also thought about picking Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Pleasantville. But I decided on Idlewild because it's a movie I hadn't seen in a long time, but it's this strange experimental musical written and created by the group Outkast, who are known for making very experimental rap music that also verges into these other genres. And here in Idlewild, we see them like blend all these genres that they're very familiar with, like rock music and hip hop, with also like Western music, and tell the story of this fictional all black town in Georgia during like 1930s prohibition era United States. And I really do love Outkast. I love, Georgia is a state that has adopted me. And also, I just really enjoy this idea of them trying to pay homage to this somewhat forgotten legacy of these like all black towns that were created in the Reconstruction era and that started to sort of fall apart as we got into the 20th century, and especially as desegregation efforts became, very popular. And, especially if you're a Southerner or a Black American Southerner, you're very familiar with this concept of some of these like all Black towns, like where I'm from has one. It was like the first all Black town in Alabama. Where I'm from is Oxford, Alabama, but there's this all Black town called Hobson City. And, Idlewild is sort of an homage to all of these cities, including like Black Wall Street in Oklahoma.
Yeah, Tulsa. So, like, what I liked about it is that, yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head, but it's an all-black movie that doesn't talk about, it's not about race, it's just about culture, it's
Right.
about history,
Yeah.
it's about that time. And it's swinging for the fences. I'm going to give this movie some credit for it knows what it wants to do, it's leaning all the way into it. And then when you sit there and you look at its budget of 10 million,
That's
you're just
crazy.
like, for what they achieved for $10 million
Yeah.
is truly astounding. For me, I had actually never heard of this movie, and I was sitting there going, sort of, why? Because I was kind of into Outkast. Outkast were absolutely pumping at the beginning of the 2000s. But I realized that at this point, I was in Singapore, and I just don't think Idlewild made it, because it was a $10 million movie, partnered up with HBO, theatrically released in America, but I just don't think it made its way over. So when you brought it up and I looked it up, I'm like, I have never heard of this movie. This is like a pretty interesting one. So I went in blind, and I was just like immediately just so taken with the creativity and the almost sort of like cartoon nature in some ways.
Yeah.
The way things are dancing around on the music. Will, Ryan, have you guys heard of this movie before?
I'd heard of this movie. Yeah, of course. I mean, I've heard of this movie. I love Outkast. It's crazy to think that this was like the last Outkast album they did together.
Right.
And in 2006. It's wild. It is essentially like a 2-hour Outkast music video, and it's fucking awesome. And it it looks incredible, and it really does take some very big swings.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
it's a lot.
That's what struck me is this is like a gorgeous looking movie.
Yeah.
Like it really kind of makes me miss like when people used to like actually light movies correctly.
Oh yeah, it
And
looked great.
it was just like, oh my god, it was so. But I was actually surprised that Andre 3000. Well, I guess not Andre 3000. I've seen him act in other things before, so I kind of expected him to like be good. But but like Big Boy was like, well, yeah, I was like surprised. I was like, wow,
Yeah.
he's actually good at this as well. And in scenes with Ving Rhames and Terrence Howard, and I'm like, yeah, he's like keeping up with them too, like as far as performance goes. So I was very surprised. For me, the highest compliment I could pay a movie is if I've never seen it before, I immediately add it to my Amazon like
Yeah.
Blu-ray wish list. Went right on there after this
Mm.
movie was done. I was like, yep, I'm adding it. I'm gonna get that movie. Like,
It's weird.
I
It's
really
like
enjoyed it.
a movie where I've listened to the soundtrack before ever having seen the movie.
Same, yeah.
You know?
I was very familiar with the soundtrack, but I had never seen the movie. The marketing for this movie, I remember being kind of odd. I remember it made it seem like it was a much darker movie than it turned out to be.
Yeah.
I think it does definitely overplay the darkness, and I think it's somewhat underplays the fun musical experimental aspects of it, because it is a very fun movie where like the bulk of its scenes take place in, a juke joint. And so it's like a really fun, fast-paced sort of movie that has this, like all these interesting like romantic subplots.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it's like, something for everybody, but I do think it's a really fun movie. And both members of Outkast are from Atlanta, and on the Idlewild album there's a song Morris Brown. Morris Brown is a historically black college in Atlanta. In the movie, Andre's 3000's character Percival says, if you can't find a way, make one, which is my alma mater, Clark Atlanta University's
Oh, wow.
motto, which is also an Atlanta University, historically black university in Atlanta. So it's like there's all these little subtle like name drops for like Georgians and for people who are from Atlanta throughout the movie. And so it's just like a very fun and authentic like Atlanta and Georgia movie that I think does, despite being all these other like very fantastical things, it's just like a fun movie about an American like town.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's shot very like comic booky too. Like there are scenes
Yes.
where it's very like there's speed ramping. It's very like Zack Snyder kind of styled
couple of
shots.
slow
Like,
motion moments.
yeah, it like in once like the shootout towards the end in particular, where I'm like this, like each scene feels like a completely different movie. It's like there are all these really wild vignettes.
It's kind of
Wild is
hard
the
to,
only way I can describe it.
you know, to not in a way, because it's not the same in any way, but at the same time it is sort of adjacent to the idea of Moulin Rouge. You've got kind of this
Oh,
this
yeah.
different sort of like Moulin Rouge-y vibes. Like the dance numbers and the choreography in this were just top notch. And then you've got the sumptuous design, so the costume design and everything else. That's why I was always going back to the what? $10 million. But kind of like you were saying, Alexa, then you realize most of the movie takes place in the joint, in like, in this one building. Then you've got Andre 3000's house, and then you've got the place where they're picking up the moonshine. But outside of that, you don't actually go anywhere else. I'm like, okay, they used what sets they had very well to stretch out that movie. That I'm like, so they could fill it to the brim with just color and craziness and loudness and choreography and slow motion and everything, that I was just like kind of just sucked in. You kind of didn't have from the get-go, you're like, okay, it's happening. There's cuckoo, what's going on here?
How did this cost 10 million, and What Lies Beneath is $100 million, also pretty much one location, and is the most boring movie we've ever seen in our lives.
Yeah,
And not a single musical number.
Yeah. A Robert Zemeckis movie, What Lies Beneath, Harrison Ford, Michelle Pfeiffer. We had it on the show and we were mystified. It is a $100 million movie that should have cost $8 million. And
I did not know it cost that much money to
It's
make. That is
crazy.
absurd, because I've also seen
Yeah.
What Lies Beneath, and once again, it's mostly in their one house.
Yeah. Way less actors, one house, $100 million.
yeah,
There's going to be some really good accountants who could probably give us answers about why movies cost so much to make. And I'm going to guess that the answer is probably embezzlement, fraud, and theft.
I see.
Most
Yeah,
likely.
I
yes.
thought 50 million went to Harrison Ford for simply removing his shirt. That was it.
Yes,
Oh,
well,
I was going to say Harrison Ford taxed them because, he had a reputation of always playing a guy who's accused of killing his wife, but actually didn't do it. So for him
Ah.
to actually be the bad guy, I think he was like, I'm going to need a little something extra.
That might be.
you were
We'll
nailing
just
it.
have to wait for the sequel.
Oh God.
Two lies, two beneath. We've got two other movies that we brought to the table as well. The next one, I mean, the thing is, the budgets on these next two movies, by comparison, are gargantuan. And we've got a $50 million and a $60 million movie. Let's talk about the $60 million movie, which at the time of release was the movie that had the most special effects shots in it until Star Wars Episode 1. It's a black and white movie that forgets the black, goes all white, and then towards the end goes, oh, maybe we should mention the black part. It's Pleasantville, 1998. This movie I have not seen, I think, since 99.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like when you brought up the idea of fictional city, and then we talked about like you can pick, any Gotham. Like it was really. I personally wanted to stay away from anything like comic book related. We can do a separate episode for that. So my gut just immediately went like, oh, Pleasantville. I remember that being like a little charming movie, very pre 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
I'm watching it. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, this isn't at all how I remember it. This is weird.
It's a movie that like it sets up a premise, then once it sort of gets going, I think they just like we're sort of then just throwing stuff at the dartboard towards the end about what can we say? Because you get to the end of the movie, and I guess my whole point with the movie is why who what. There's no answers to the questions. Is Reese Witherspoon existing in another world that they have created that's become a mirror universe to our own? Is anyone going to notice that she's not back while Tobey Maguire?
Crazy.
I'm like, what's happening?
What? I was wondering that myself because I definitely did not remember the endings. Like I remember like little bits and pieces and scenes of this movie. I probably had never watched it straight through, or maybe I did back in the day, but seeing how this ends, and then you get that like tail end with Joan Allen sitting on the bench with William H. Macy, and then
Jeff Daniels,
it's fucking wild. It's crazy.
I thought I had watched like a version that cut something out, like or like I thought like I'd maybe look down and miss something.
Yeah,
because I was working like while this is on, so I'll give the movie, for me personally, I'm like I was kind of like 80-20 paying attention to it. I was kind of like and then would look down. That was the part where I looked back up and I'm like, wait, all right, hold on, I definitely missed something. And then watched it, I'm like, oh no, I didn't. I don't know what's going on. Okay.
Alexa, what do you think about Pleasantville? The thing is, there's a lot to get into with Pleasantville, but at the same time, it's like it is a fascinating, random, swing for the fences kind of movie story. What did you think?
I also, just have childhood memories of this movie because it was a movie that came on cable a lot, but it was much wilder than I remembered. Like, it has good intentions. It's, a very 90s movie that's trying to make a point about like, hey, the Leave It to Beaver lifestyle wasn't very fulfilling for a lot of people, specifically like women and minorities.
Right.
And so like it's trying to make a point that like we can accept that this image of modern American life wasn't all that it was cracked up to be, but it feels as if there was like an original script, and then as they kept going they remembered that they had forgotten all like these other things, and they just kind of like kept making these like random edits near the end or something, and it's just like it doesn't come together because like you mentioned, at one point it just seems like orgasms is what causes people to become colorized, and then it becomes another thing.
Right.
I
was wondering that too, is because I think it's established because you see Reese Witherspoon's character doesn't change until like each character doesn't get colorized until like there's
one book
until they change. Yeah.
Well,
no, she puts the cardigan on, she puts the glasses
on.
Yeah. She tells Paul Walker, "Not today, sir."
And see, that's the other thing too. I'm not loving her story, like her character's arc either. The idea that she had, just had never cracked a book before.
Yeah.
Once the second she did, she realized, you know what? All these sexual relationships with men were actually empty and unfulfilling. Like I don't know if specifically reading Huckleberry Finn is going to do that for you.
Right. Well, I did
Uh,
like
Yeah.
the bit later in the movie where they're burning books and she grabs it, but she goes, "No, no, you're not taking this book. This is the only book I've ever read." And it quickly, and I saw it's Lady Chatterley's Lover. So even though
Oh.
she's reading a book,
Okay.
she's still reading
Yeah.
horny books. You know,
Yeah, I
So
imagine,
she-
but
All right.
imagine she grabs it and it's the novelization of the film Eraser. Now we're talking.
There we
You
go.
could
Which
have-
Will
you
has,
could
and
have
he's
shot
sitting right-
higher and said maybe a little Betty Friedan, a little
Yeah.
a copy of the feminine mystique could have helped this movie
Something.
a lot
Yeah.
better.
And when I watched this younger, it's how ignorant of me. Like I didn't clock how much was built around the whole racial aspect of this movie until watching it the other day. I'm like,
Well,
what the?
it
what?
isn't, then isn't, because it's kind of
Right.
brought over like the sexism. It's kind of everything, and then it just suddenly it's. Will was the one that was kind of saying it, and I completely
Yeah.
get it because it's late '90s, kind of like you were saying it as well, Alexa. Is that they bring it up and they get into the whole colorism, and you can just feel themselves patting themselves on the back.
We've done
It was
Yeah,
so
we
clever.
did
We've
it,
solved
guys.
racism. Yep.
We
Yeah.
solved it. We
We're
explained
gonna blow
it.
their minds with this, man. Yeah.
It was
It's
through the
so
lens of
funny
now.
because once again, it like the whole racism plot doesn't come in until you're like, darn near 3/4 of the way through the
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, this one very minor character goes full Klansman. It's
Yeah.
just automatically ready. He
God.
said, "Let's get rid of all of these people with color. They've got to go." And it just and then the only thing that then changes his mind is him becoming a person of color, so to speak. And
And what was his change? He said
Well,
just
they
him
made him
just getting angry.
yeah,
Yeah.
him getting angry,
Okay.
I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, there's not,
It's
I'm not
wild.
understanding what makes people.
And objects,
Careful.
like what makes an object change?
True.
Like
Right.
there's no
Yeah,
like
'cause
what
why
the
did
rules are
Mary
unclear.
turn red near the beginning?
Yeah.
Like, what was that about? Except for some sort of sexual innuendo.
Right. Or
Yeah.
that berry used to be racist and now it's not.
Oh, there we
Exactly.
go.
See, I think my take on it is repression. So it's people sort of like if they're repressing their anger or they're repressing the fact that they can express their love for somebody else, or they can repress their sexuality or repress their intelligence, blah blah blah. That once you sort of let yourself be freer, then society, I guess, in Pleasantville sort of allowed you to be. Then it enabled you to become colorful. I think the one thing that was then missing, if they've made this commentary and then they've got into the race thing, is that at the end, when now this world exists, I'm like,
I
where
guess,
are the people of color? You know, I
Right.
was
It's still all
expecting-
white people.
It's just, I was like, still? Like,
What?
okay, well, look on TV, look, other countries exist. And I'm like, we've swung and missed, but in a 90s way that they were like, hey, at least
Right.
we swung, you know? At
No,
least
they
we...
said the colored people live in a different town. They don't live in Pleasantville. They live somewhere else.
They live in Idlewild.
They're spoonfuls, exactly.
Well, we'll get back to that as well. There's a lot.
It's
Because the thing
crazy.
is, there's a lot about this movie that is very interesting and really fun and sort of like inventive and
Yeah.
things like that. But there's also one more movie, which we've all, I think, all of us sort of popped into our head when it came into this, and it was I was like going back to it. It's been a very long time since I've watched it. 1988's Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and I put it on. And we often talk about this, Alex, is that there's a little trepidation at the back of your brain. It's like, is this thing I remember, does it suck? And no, it does not. In the first 5 minutes of the movie, I was laughing my ass off during that opening cartoon, remembering seeing it in the theaters as a child. And for the rest of the runtime, I was just lost in the magic trick that is this movie. And in my opinion, it's an absolute banger. What do you guys think?
I felt the exact opposite.
Yes, you
Like,
did.
Yeah, I mean, because this came out in '88 and I was 5 years old. I remember seeing it, and I remember as anyone at that age, like this movie is like inherently scary. Like you'd think you're going to see this animated thing, and this is a very adult film marketed as like this kind of cartoon thing, and it's really not, and it's pretty dark and gritty subject matter. That said, like I remember loving the animated intro. It's the animation, the work in this is unbelievable, and it still holds up to this day. It looks fantastic. That said, I didn't find this movie funny at all. I just couldn't. I didn't like it when I was younger, and I watched it. I'm like, I still don't like it.
And yet you're all in on Cool World.
No,
Like-
I was joking. Yeah. That movie's just like that movie is the right amount of horny, and you have animated Brad Pitt, and so.
That is true.
But
Yeah,
I
but-
also I remember this movie. I for some reason thought it like Toon World was like a bigger like element to this movie. Toontown was a better element, like a bigger element of this movie, but he's only there for like 5 minutes.
True, but the thing is, it's an LA that is not real. It's an alternate version of LA that has a suburb of Toontown that also at the same time is kind of making commentary on, like, because LA did used to have one of the best integrated transport systems in the world until all of the car companies paid for their politicians and got rid of them, so everyone can enjoy the 405 now. Lucky LA, you guys nailed it. But
I love it. It's fantastic.
I love this movie. Ryan, you're completely wrong. But at the same time, there is an element of this where when you start asking the difficult questions of, well, how does it work for cartoons? And did he just murder a sentient shoe? And are these cartoons slaves to humanity? When you ask too many questions, that's when you're like, what's happening here? Alexa, what's your take on Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Because from the face, I'm thinking you liked it.
Oh yeah, I love Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I think probably I never saw it as a young child. I didn't see it at least until I was like maybe like middle school age. I think it's, maybe Chinatown for preteens.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a great way to think of it. I love this movie. I think it's also a great way to kind of explain how, gentrification did take over LA in a way. Like, this is how suburbs and, like you said, the highway was built in LA. I would say the Toons also are like second class citizens. Like
Definitely.
they are like they have two jobs, like industries. They're either entertainers or they are in service. Like they are in like the people of color of LA. And I really do like this movie though. I do think it's funny. I think all the Toons make it very funny, but I think it's like a really good example of like what people kind of think of Robert Zemeckis as like a director. Like I think his most famous films are probably like this, Death Becomes Her. Like when people are Back to the Future, like when people think of him as a director, it's definitely this ability to blend this sci-fi with comedy and make like themes that could be very scary and dark and weird a little lighter with some of these special effects. But I, in general, do really like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but it is a little scary near the end.
It's terrifying, even now at the end. And it's a cartoon kids movie that deals with murder, deals with a smoking baby, deals with smacks on the ass. It deals with just like all of these aspects of sort of noir and this like the detective thing that I'm like, what? Like it's
baby's first noir.
Yeah.
Yes.
I get it. And I have an appreciation for it. It just didn't. This movie just never like really resonated with me that much.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Considering like I went to school for animation and love all of this stuff. Like I said, I have a very I appreciate this movie and the tech and like everything it did, but it just didn't. Watching it again, it just didn't land for me.
Wow. Will, tell him how wrong he is.
I mean, yes.
I know I'm wrong, but
I love this movie. I actually watch this fairly regularly. And I was telling you guys over text, I have an affection for Bob Hoskins. He has a quality that really reminds me of my grandfather, like just a guy in general, not really this role. But so I always kind of endeared to Bob Hoskins and whatever he's doing. But he's on top of that just a phenomenal actor as well. But yeah, I think Alexa, you're right. This is like baby's first noir because I remember seeing this as a kid and immediately like falling in love with this genre. And just like from there on going into exploring like other films in like a similar vein that are more mature.
This watch I clocked Bob Hoskins' outfit in this is reminiscent of when Raphael dresses up like this guy in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He's wearing the trench coat, the hat. I'm like, oh shit.
Oh, when I was like 5 or 6, I'm like, well, that's how cool people dress.
Bring those
like
tiny ties, like
in a fedora,
fat and short ties. Great.
Want to get things done. If you want to get to the bottom of things, you have to put on a trench coat and a fedora.
Me, I was dressed up like that at 70. I was being Elliot Ness in a trench coat and a fedora, running around just like playing Untouchable.
The bit where he's like, "How'd your brother die?" He's like, "Boom, dropped the piano on him." Like the casualness of like these worlds melding. Like I love all that stuff. It didn't hit for me. Maybe I wasn't in the right mindset when I watched it, but I remember seeing it when I was a kid and I was like, okay, I get it. And it was like scary for me. And then getting older and seeing it again. And I just like, I've seen it a ton of times. It just didn't like.
let's stick on this road. Let's get into Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So just in case, if you're at home and you've never heard of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, first of all, what are you doing with your life? Second of all,
should
like I
hang
said,
out.
a 1988 movie directed by Robert Zemeckis tells the story. It's basically a sort of, much like the guys have perfectly described it. Think of it like film noir, Chinatown, LA Confidential. This sort of classic sort of whodunit, but in a world in LA where cartoons exist. They are real things. And so that entire world is blended into this sort of historical LA. It stars Bob Hoskins as our muckety muck at the beginning, our private investigator, Christopher Lloyd, in a role that he's killing, and then gives you nightmares. You got Kathleen Turner as the sexiest cartoon ever drawn. Mel Blanc turning up as some of the greatest cartoon voices. I mean, honestly, you can get into it, but essentially what it is a whodunit, which turns into a greater conspiracy, which is just classic LA-based crime noir. But when it came out, 1988, so I mean, like, I was, 7 years old when this movie was coming out. And I'm like, the thing I remember is, much like Ryan and I talk about a lot, is that when we were younger, when movies were coming out on a weekend at about 1 in the afternoon or 11 o'clock in the morning, they'd start putting on these 30-minute, 40-minute behind-the-scenes specials about these movies that were coming out. And for me, it's all of the magic trick that was how they made things real then interact with cartoons who are interacting with real people. And it's just the mastery of puppetry and technology, and just honestly, when you see it, when you see There's Roger Rabbit, and when you see the reality, which is 2 bits of metal and just water spitting out, the way that they take that and sell the magic trick is...
The rotoscoping is unbelievable.
It is miraculous. For me, the scene that I want to talk about that I think boils down the whole movie is the Donald and Daffy dueling pianos in the club with the penguins. I mean, that's when I was like, nope, this movie's incredible.
Yeah. Like I said, the animation on it is leaps and bounds above what you see currently. Like, it's crazy to think that. And I don't know why I thought this movie came out in the 90s.
No, I couldn't believe it when I saw 88 as well. I mean, so Alexa, like, I'm assuming you are much, much younger than us. Like, what was your first experience of Roger Rabbit? Because I saw it in theaters.
Okay, see, I wasn't alive when it originally came out, but I remember later so as a younger millennial growing up, I was a ardent student of I Love the 70s, 80s, and 90s on VH1. And Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a movie that's mentioned in like the I Love the 80s episodes. And so like upon hearing about this movie, I was like very intrigued, and eventually like got to it and watched it, like I think maybe renting it or something like that around the age of like 11, and immediately was very, very into it, and thought that, like I said, I'd never seen a lot of these other like classic noirs, but I knew I liked this. I like detective mysteries, and I thought it was such a like fun and interesting take on it. And like I just do think it holds up very well, but I do think it's a fun like way to talk about America, because it's like this fictionalized version of LA, but obviously is trying to like communicate real things about how LA was built and everything. But so I think it's just like a really good blending of genres. I've never, to my understanding, this is also based on a book. I've never read the book. But I would think like a lot of these same themes are there.
It kind of, I can't remember if I actually read the entire book. I read at least part of it. It's very different. It's much
the 1981 novel Who Censored Roger Rabbit.
That's the one. Yep.
Yeah, it's much darker. And yeah, just the concept of it doesn't quite, I think this is why I stopped reading it, is because the concept doesn't quite work in literature form.
Right. I was gonna say.
Yeah, it just does not pack the same punch. But I will say, I think later, like after this movie came out, I think the author went back and made a sequel which is clearly a sequel to the movie.
Sure. Like
even the author was like, oh yeah, this is bad. Let's make a sequel to like the actual film. Because I just remember the book not being very interesting and being like, okay, it's one of these cases kind of like Jaws, where like they took the book and they're like, okay, we can actually make something good out of this. We don't have to follow this.
I do appreciate though the like because I did never clocked it when I was a kid, but this is like one of the first like multiverse type of things where you have Warner Brothers and Hanna-Barbera, like all of these animated characters in this world, not specifically like, okay, we only have access to Warner Brothers characters. We like you have a scene with Mickey Mouse. It's like having all of these animated characters together is like a miracle. And
It was
like
a
the
big
licensing,
deal.
like
Yeah.
When they announced the movie and when you're seeing the movie, that was very much part of what they were talking about. Is that look, we've got Warner Brothers, Hanna-Barbera, Disney. We bought them all those things that we as children and then also our parents had grown up with. So for us, like every now and again, you know, when you got Pistol Pete or whatever his name, and all these guys that we're used to seeing suddenly turning up.
Betty Boop, like
you know, for their cameo, and it's like it is timeless. Like Alexa, I think it's because it's a set in, you know, the genre. It's set in the time. It's its own little time capsule. Then add on the 80s and the animation. That it's a movie that you can watch. You'll be able to watch in 100 years' time and still be like, oh, this movie holds up.
Well, that's the thing about it that's like kind of disappointing. It definitely holds up, but I don't know how well it'll translate to any generation younger than like millennials, because like when the movie comes out in 1988, it still exists in the context of like you have cable television. So you have people who like you were like 7 and 8, but you still were familiar with these characters that had technically originated when your grandparents had been children. So, and I don't know if like the idea of some like even now, I don't know, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the show Venture Brothers. Like even now when I talk to people who are younger than me about that show, they have no concept of Johnny Quest and that what it is actually referencing. So I do wonder how especially since like for some of these characters, the characterization of them in the cartoons is sort of important because they're like playing against type in the movie. And so like I wonder how some of these nuances will be lost to like younger generations.
Was that whole thing where like these old like Warner Brothers, like Hanna-Barbera, like or the Merry Melodies, like all of these old cartoons that I grew up watching because they were just on all the time. So I was so familiar with these
channels. So.
Right. And now like that whole section of animation is just like is either gone or just buried within the bowels of Max or whatever. Like no one is introduced to these characters or seeing them anymore. It's either SpongeBob or get the fuck out.
Yeah, because we try to get like we showed the kids when they were younger. We'd get on YouTube and show some of these sort of classic old. But the thing is, that's what I mean. Is that's what I liked about that first 5 minutes, is that we have a Roger Rabbit cartoon that none of us have ever seen Roger Rabbit at this point, right? And so as an introduction to the character, I have to be honest, it's a brilliant way of doing it. But it also just made me 7 years old again. I'm just watching it and I'm laughing and laughing and laughing and laughing. And I'm remembering how hard I was laughing as a child in the theater. And it's just that kind of classic cartoon of that era of like, that's how we grew up. It was Roger Rabbit and Daffy Duck and Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century and all this kind of stuff and Tom and Jerry and everything that I didn't even think about, Alexa, like the cultural, you know, you're right. One more step away. My children are already that. They understand the Mickey Mouse and they understand, but they didn't grow up with a Goofy movie. They didn't grow up with. So that's
their sexual awakening wasn't Jessica Rabbit,
right? Whereas for me,
or Benny the Cat,
right?
I wonder, like, because I was thinking about this the other day, like, kind of along the same lines, like, what would be the 2004 or 2024 equivalent of like
Rescue Rangers?
I guess Chip and Dale, but I mean, like, if you were to like truly make this movie today for like what kids wanted, it would be, I guess, SpongeBob and Goku and I don't know, maybe the Affleck duck. I don't even know like what would kids recognize as like
for a lot of kids. I think like somewhat of an equivalent would be a mishmash of a bunch of anime characters. Like as somebody who has like an 8-year-old niece, she watches a lot of anime and she would be interested in My Hero Academia, Naruto, some sort of like universe. And it's like, okay, I'd take you to go see that movie, but I'm not.
It'd be like that. It'd be like the game Kingdom Hearts, where you're just taking all these kind of properties and kind of dumping them in.
You know, at some point though, they'd have to open a door and it'd be Skibbity Toilet. you know, and it's
Yeah.
just
Well,
like...
now hang on. Now I might be interested.
Or it'd just be like a fucking Rick and Morty episode, really. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
any kind of
100%.
multiverse or nonsense.
Well, see, that's the other thing too, is that like the line between kids content and adult content is
Yeah.
so blurred that for a lot of kids it would be like a Rick and Morty, Family Guy, Bob's Burgers.
Oh
Yeah,
God.
for sure.
That would
Archer,
literally be
yeah.
my nightmare.
Well, let's
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about that. In that this movie, it rides a very fine line
Yeah.
between being for adults and being for children.
And I think I skewed on that age thing. I was too young. Like when I saw this movie, I absolutely loved the opening, the cartoon, the animation. And then I think once it dove into more of that like adult subject matter, I just wasn't mentally ready for it. Like it didn't click with me. I didn't grasp it. So I was not at the right age to appreciate this film, I think.
I don't think age's got anything to do with it. I think you could be 8 and 18.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, because I saw it when I was very, very young. And I also think I also kind of just identified where I'm like, well, Eddie Valiant is a chunky little guy who is the hero of the movie. So as a chunky little guy myself, I'm like, I like this. And yeah, I like that.
He's a man who gets his cigarettes from children.
He is
Yeah.
he is a just built. He's basically
He's a
built
barrel.
like Wolverine in the comic books.
Yeah.
you know?
Ooh, hang on.
I mean, there was that rumor for a long time that he was like, when they were thinking about making an X-Men movie in like the 80s, that they were like looking at Bob Hoskins like, well, he could do Wolverine.
Hell yeah.
But he also just
What an
has,
insane world that would have been.
he
I would have
has-
loved it.
Considering the fact that Harrison Ford, Chevy Chase, Bill Murray, Eddie Murphy, Robin Williams, Robert Redford, Jack Nicholson, Sylvester Stallone, on and on and on and on and on, were all considered for this role, and then you settle on Bob Hoskins. It was Steven Spielberg that kind of brought him in. Is that he's freaking awesome in this movie? He's effortless in this movie. He completely hits on that character, that genre, like hits the nail on the head. And then when you get to the end, where he starts like goofing around and singing, and just it's just the guy can do anything. The guy, like, as an actor, I'm sorry, bloody hell, man, he sells.
I think for
this
most
movie.
people like our age, this was probably our introduction to Bob Hoskins, right?
Oh,
Well, as a Brit,
definitely.
we understood Bob Hoskins. He was a bit
All
more
right.
He made appearances at boarding schools.
There you
So
go.
that was
We get it. You've seen Danny the dog.
yeah, Danny the dog. Yeah,
It was
good
called
one.
Unleashed over here.
It
Whatever.
was called Unleashed. That's right. Deep cut, deep cut. But no. Let's just talk more about he seems. You look at that list, you'd think he would be bottom of the list, and he pretty much was, and he was perfect. You know?
Yeah, it's
He's
crazy.
not like the most famous person on the list, and so, but I think that this is like a good example of where like casting has gone wrong in more modern films. Is that like, now people would say, well, Bob Hoskins' Instagram following is just not,
Yeah.
but he's
Right.
out of all the guys you named, he's the most like a noir detective. Like
He's got the
Yeah.
grit.
he
Yeah.
seems like he would actually be Marlowe. And that's like
Yeah.
it's
Mhm.
like essentially what you're looking for. And also, you said Jack Nicholson, and I think that's when this movie really would have veered into a horror film. Jack Nicholson is
Yeah.
a person that
Yeah.
no matter what character he's playing, there's an air of menace. And I just think that would have been too much.
Yeah, even
Yeah.
in Something's Gotta Give, there's like, you're watching that movie, you're like,
I
I know
not
this is
sure
a
about-
romantic comedy. I'm still a little on edge. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of like modern casting of this. I'm like, I could see the villain as like Liam Neeson or something,
Well,
like Christopher Lloyd's
the
character.
modern casting, they'd probably cast Chris Pratt. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's an easy one for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it's
I mean,
like,
I couldn't think of-
no,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's not right.
Danny DeVito, obviously.
Yeah.
And see, that would be the right decision. As somebody who like truly does love Danny DeVito,
The closest we got was him to playing the detective Cat in Last Action Hero. That was it.
Yeah.
we need to get Danny DeVito back on the big screen.
Yeah.
Twins
Yeah.
3. Let's get Twins 2.
They
Right?
were talking about that, wasn't it, with Eddie
Okay,
Murphy?
but
Eddie
I
Murphy, yeah.
watched
Triplets.
Twins
Triplets. Yeah.
What did you sorry, Alexa, what did you say? What did
I
you
would
watch?
watch Twins too,
Oh yeah.
about them
1000%.
looking for a retirement home. I'd be into that.
I would be down as the world's biggest Arnold Schwarzenegger fan. And
Hell
I
yeah.
love Twins because it's so
The
silly.
two of them just plowing ass in a retirement home. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'd be so down.
Writing the
Breaking
ship a little bit.
hearts and lips and hips.
But like, no, it's still talking more about like how this movie switches gears when Judge Doom rocks up. So Christopher Lloyd rocks up, and then we're introduced to Dip, and then we are all introduced to our first collective trauma moment.
Yeah.
Of him taking the cutest little cartoon shoe and murdering it very slowly. The camera doesn't cut away. We watch it, and I'm watching it again at 43, going, ooh, like 8-year-old me was not happy in this particular moment. And let's not lie, it puts stakes in a movie where it's invulnerable cartoon people.
Yeah.
Suddenly they can die. That's what we're doing in this movie. Hey, what if we could murder a cartoon?
But you're describing like a very visceral reaction that Will, you bring up all the time, is that movies now are not like, do not scare children. Like aren't
right.
They're either like horror movies that are not for kids, or they're like very like a safety net for children where no one ever gets hurt and everything is magical. And
yeah, we can't ever scare, and kids like to be scared a little bit. That's like,
listen, we're still talking about this.
Because they're like, we see now, like there's this push to get book, like there's like, oh well, maybe kids shouldn't read Charlotte's Web because it's sad and somebody dies at the end. And I do think like at the same time, I think kids like to be scared. Life is scary for children. Like they're not in control over anything. And I think there's something to be said that like movies and books that talk about this and have high stakes help them like really cope with that reality. Like, you know, if you're a little kid, this is a movie that definitely explains the concept of death to you. Death is permanent.
For sure.
Yeah. And I mean, like when we were kids, like one of the reasons kids became readers was because there's a whole series called Goosebumps that was just horror for kids, and people died in those. Like, you know, so it's refreshing when you like watch some of these older movies and you're like, okay, they weren't afraid. You know, it's not gore, it's not Saw, but it's enough to like, you know, give kids a little bit of that thrill of like a horror movie and stuff, and introduce them to the idea of death.
I grew up reading endlessly. I read them over and over again, but I read all the Roald Dahl books. And that's where like my missus is like, what the fuck is wrong with British people? Like every Roald Dahl book is just trauma and murder and eating kids, and like, and we're like, yeah, they're great, aren't they? She's like, no wonder you're such a strange people. This is what you grew up on. I was like, oh, I've never thought about it like that. But then going back around is like, I love those books. You know, and they are kind of scary. And you've got Boggis and Bunsen Bean trying to kill Fantastic Mr. Fox, and you've got the Vermicious Canids trying to kill the kids when we're up in space in the Great Glass Elevator, and you got the Twits and stuff like that.
You're right.
And I'm talking about it now, burned into my memory.
You know what? You're right. You should take your daughter to see The Substance.
But I think that's the difference, is that like when you compare, you know, this multiverse situation to what the big multiverse is for kids now, Marvel, is that both of them have plenty of violence. If anything, Marvel has much more violence, but the violence here is with stakes, and then none of the violence in Marvel really has any stakes. Any character that dies can be brought back.
Right.
Technically, none of the good guys actually kill people. They just incapacitate them. So it's like, I think it's the absence of stakes. Like we know that when he dips the adorable shoe into this like substance, he's gone for.
Yeah. Right. And anytime that dip is brought back up, like they dump it out and then you see Benny skid through, you're like, oh no, like you don't want them anywhere near that. Like it's
right. Let's also talk about how the movie goes from a murder mystery to escalating to genocide. That is essentially Dr. Doom's plan, is to not just kill a cartoon, but is to take Dip and perform a genocide against the entire world of cartoons in order to make money and build a highway. Pure capitalism. But and the thing is, let's talk about stakes at the end of the movie. You got to give Zemeckis credit for this. Is he's really good at doing this. It's oh, they're safe, oh no they're not, oh they're safe, oh no they're not, oh they're safe, oh no,
I remember the bit where he's streaming, Roger and Jessica are tied up and they're swinging back and forth in the stream. Like the stake, you're so right, Alexa, the stakes like are so high in this movie and you really feel them, and that's I think what's missing from most modern type films like this.
Yeah.
The bit that the movie changes for everybody there is, I mean, guys, I can tell you what it was like in theaters.
The
when,
reveal of him as the
yes,
tune.
he's
Yeah,
getting
dude,
run
fuck.
over by the thing.
The
and
sounds,
you're like,
the
as a
screams.
kid, and then it flips on a switch, and suddenly, and he turns around with those bloody cartoon eyes, and I'm like, nope,
Still don't
I'm
like
out.
it. Still don't like it. Yeah.
By the way,
And he's doing the voice.
But
Yeah.
the reveal is so amazing because it's
Yeah.
like the idea that the villain of this story is an elected official and a judge, somebody who's an officer of the court, and is using laws to it's a great explainer for
That
the
could never happen.
concept of structural violence.
Yeah.
And
Name me 500 times it's happened in real life. You can't.
Exactly.
Right.
And then the idea that at the end of the day, Judge Doom is just Clarence Thomas. He's self-hating. That's what this is really
Yeah.
about. That that is just chef's kiss.
I think, and too, like, also seeing this younger is like, you forget like how unrecognizable Christopher Lloyd is, like seeing him in this as this villain. Like, it's this movie and Dennis the Menace, where you're like, that's not Christopher Lloyd, is it? And he's just unhinged, and I love it.
Yeah,
Well,
this
I'm here for
movie,
him.
Star Trek 3, obviously we all know Christopher Lloyd as the Klingon in Star Trek 3.
He's great in
Oh,
that.
Every time.
But like the thing about like Christopher Lloyd is that's one of those magic tricks that they pulled on us, is that
Yeah.
because he looked so old in Back to the Future, then they de-aged him.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So then it's kind of the same thing that Maggie Smith, R.I.P.
Yes.
this week, that they pulled a magic trick with her, is because everyone saw her in Pan, where she was 50 something, but they used makeup to make her 80. So then
right.
everyone's like, why is she the same age for 40 years?
Right.
yeah.
True.
But yeah, that's why
Sm-
Christopher Lloyd, he was always ambiguously aged to me, because
Yeah, true. And the white hair, like, yeah, he was always old to me, like, because of Back to the Future.
There's an
Yeah.
argument that that's definitely the way to play it for your career. Just start playing old really early.
Yeah.
it's like
and then,
Harrison Ford played 40 for 35 years.
Yeah.
And,
Absolutely.
he pulled that shit off.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we can all agree the turning point was What Lies Beneath.
100%.
Yeah. I love the Judge Doom character and that reveal where he does the whole "Remember me, Eddie." One of my best friends when I worked at Hollywood Video was Eddie, and I used to just, whenever I was bored, I'd call into the store, and he'd be like, "Hey, Hollywood Video, Ray and Roll," and I'd be like, "Remember me, Eddie," and I would do the whole. I would wait till it was really busy too, so that I knew he was like with a customer and there was a line
my
of
God.
people, because I'm just like, this is gonna be funnier that we're gonna waste this time.
I picture your mouth shooting through the phone like some sort of Walter Rabbit type.
Well,
Yeah.
let's along those lines, right? So we've talked about stakes, and we've talked about it being scary, and we've talked about, death being a part of this movie. Another big part of this movie is sex. We have Jessica Rabbit, who is just quite literally just all tits and ass. I mean, like, it just big lips, and just like, she's just pure sex. And it's like, but then people react to her that way. When she's pressing
Well, she's
her
just
breasts up,
drawn that way. Yeah.
right. I'm just drawn that way. But like the bit that I think is really like funny is that towards the beginning, where Eddie is just doing his job and they're playing patty cake. You're just hearing it, but then you see the pictures and you realize they really just were playing patty cake.
Yeah.
But it's just the idea that in this world, sex exists. Sexiness exists. And again, this is supposed to be a kids movie, and we're making jokes out of her boobs. Remember the bit where he goes to Toontown and then he opens the door and it looks like Jessica Rabbit's half naked, and then suddenly it's the
the crazy
that crazy person. And it just the fact that
that character had a name too. So I was like, are all these based off of? I guess that was like, I remember that character from cartoons prior to Roger Rabbit. Maybe, I don't know.
But like, no, but what about like the idea? Did you guys? I didn't even really think about it until I was thinking about it. Just going, wait a minute, there's a lot of sexy to this movie as well, and it's a kids cartoon.
I mean, it makes sense though, because like all girl like cartoon characters are super sexualized. Like, especially when they do like there's Bugs Bunny and then there's like Lola Bunny. When there's going to be a female counterpart, and they're like, well, we've got to make her distinctive in some way. We got to let them know that she's a girl. Huge bust line, big lips. Like, so I do think it's like an interesting way to try to talk about the way women in general can be sexualized against their will, because like that's the thing about Jessica's character, like how it originally begins because everybody thinks Jessica's having this affair because of how she looks, and like, well, why would she even be interested in Roger? So it's like this idea that people already have these preconceived ideas about her just because of how she looks. And in many ways, like I think Kathleen Turner is like with the voice is like trying to be Marilyn Monroe reminiscent, sort of like in Hollywood, the standard of a woman who had these preconceived ideas impressed upon her simply because of how she looked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I mean, it
And-
all started with Miss Pac-Man. I mean, just,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
The way
Another
that people
unrealistic-
talk about Mrs. Met on the internet is filthy.
Who?
Mrs.
Mrs.
Met.
Met.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh, God. And it's a man in that suit.
It is. That's who I've been DMing. Oh, I gotta hold on. I need to correct
But
something.
also, like, I mean, that conversation carries forward into now, into video games, you know, in that, like, you know, all of the incels online are like, wait, but, like, I don't want to fuck this video game character. She just looks like a normal human female. Like, what I don't understand. And everyone else is on the outside going, guys, seriously, like, read the room. You know?
It's so gross.
Why,
And then
why
you
doesn't
have-
this cave woman have makeup on? And it's like,
Yeah, it's crazy.
what?
When they,
They just-
rebooted Space Jam and they, you know, toned down the Lola Bunny design, people were like, how dare you
Or the
make the
fucking
female bunny less
the-
sexual?
Even before that, it was the green M&M.
green
It's
M&M.
fucking nuts. Like, are you
Yeah, you've
nuts?
got literally on the news Tucker Carlson complaining about why can't we want to fuck a green M&M, and I'm like, how far have we fallen as a society?
I mean, that is one of my favorite clips to send around to people. Just be like, oh man, have you heard the news? And just send the clip of him ranting about the
Jesus.
M&M. It's possibly the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life.
You know, I like, and that was a great perspective, Alex, as well. Because then I was thinking, you know, there is that moment as well when Ryan, you brought it up, but we're in the club, and there's Betty, and so there's Betty Boop, and she herself has got her own sort of sexualized sort of vibe, right? In that kind of innocent way, though. But then she's sort of black and white, so she's kind of the past, and then we immediately go to animation, so with a dress that, you know, the way her dress sparkles is just, you know, so we've gone from sort of classic sort of 2D animation to this thing, and then Bob Hoskins' reaction to it is kind
The way
of
the camera moves around that space too, and how they animate around that in perspective is still like, I'm watching this from the lens. I'm like, how the fuck did they do that? Like, how did they do this?
Well,
It's
I'm watching it from the lens of remembering the behind the scenes of that. So the entire set is built like 10 feet higher. And so then there's all the puppeteers are underneath with their carrying the trays. So they're on sort of like these sticks. And if you look closely, you'll see like you'll take a drink off, they kind of unstick the drink kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's all being done kind of like this. These dudes
But
are
it
just
still
bouncing around.
works. Like, I love being able to see the seams, seeing like contact, not being able to line up perfectly. Like, yeah, it's a little floaty at times, but man, like even when the gangsters are holding like the real pistols going around, like,
Oh, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And again, it's being done by either hanging or by from underneath. And I remember, like I said, the behind
It
the scenes,
grounds the whole thing. Like,
it works. I was watching it, and that's how I describe. Like I said, when I described it at the beginning, is it's a magic trick. It is a 2-hour-long magic trick that from the first few minutes you're not questioning it. You're just on board. No, that's real. They're interacting. That's a cartoon, and it's those little magic tricks like making bits of paper flap, you know, when someone goes past it, like make the bit where the thing goes, hits the water towards, you know, like Bob Hoskins, he splashes the water on his face, and it's just, they've sat and thought about every little trick and gag that they can
the
do. And
bit
like,
when
all right, let's do it.
he's in the cab, like that car chase scene around the city. I'm like, how the fuck did they just have him in like a teacup zipping him around?
They're sitting on so him, Bob Hoskins, and then it's basically a big go-kart. And then there's just a dude sitting in the front, and he's just all dressed in black, and they just animated all over the top of it. So he's just sort of strapped into this thing and goes for a ride with a professional driver. It's
now, like, you think about it now, the whole thing would just be this like polished CGI thing. It just wouldn't, I don't know if it would connect as well.
I was just gonna say, and it's not like you're talking about like, some of the minor glitches and stuff that you can see here, but it's like it's not as if the CGI isn't without its own
No,
glitches.
you're right.
Like
Hmm.
if they did this now and it was all CGI, we would still be saying same thing, but it would be due to like time constraints and poor wages.
Yeah. Well, no, HBO
Right,
would just
yeah.
HBO would just cancel it and just shove it away in a fucking
Right.
vault
Just
somewhere.
write it
Might not
off.
ever come
David
out.
Zaslav.
Yeah, I think
there
the
we go.
people were saying that was it, or maybe you were saying that was it Coyote versus Acme was the modern day version of like a Who Framed Roger
You know
Rabbit,
what? Yeah.
and then
Well,
it's just
the
we'll
one I
never
said
get
was
it.
it came out in 2022 was Chip and Dale.
Right,
Is,
right.
is where they
Yeah.
took the same approach but different.
Yeah.
But they were also able to bring in all of the characters and classic
Yeah.
Disney characters, and it was a
I've-
very funny movie. It's just
I've only
not
seen
Roger
the
Rabbit.
I've only seen the ugly Sonic bit because I'm Tim Robinson obsessed. And
Yeah,
it's maybe the best part.
Yeah, that's about the only part of that movie I was interested in.
Oh, I know. I like the bit
Somebody
where the
has to
Uncanny
liberate
Valley.
Coyote the Acme.
Sorry,
Mhm.
say that again.
Yeah.
Somebody has to liberate that
Yes.
Yeah.
Coyote the Acme.
They should make a movie about them breaking into the studio to steal the movie and then
Yeah.
release the movie.
It
That'd be
should
cool.
end with, or at least the climax of the movie should be them realizing that David Zaslav has stolen the movie for himself, and then he shows it to people to
Yeah.
show
Oh
off.
shit! And
Yeah.
he's also a tune. What?
Yes. There we go.
Yeah.
There's little things like, we often talk about this at Alexa, that even if it's a movie we've seen 100 times when we do it for the podcast, you kind of watch it again for the first time. And there's things that I'm almost like slapping myself in the face for, like going, man, I can't believe I didn't get that. Like, for example, like the bad company being Cloverleaf, because it's like a highway intersection. Didn't get that. Or the little thing that I'm like, I was even amazed that the bit at the end of the movie where Bob Hoskins' character gets all the weasels to kill themselves, again, murder, but like just by laughing themselves to death. He's, doing all this wacky, crazy stuff, which I never put together until I'm watching the movie again, and we get that bit where the camera goes across his dead brother's desk, and we get a moment where taking the kids to work, dad was a clown, the kids were clowns. He's a classically trained clown. Never picked up on that ever until I'm watching it this time, which explains how at the end he's doing backflips and he's juggling and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like,
Oh wow.
oh, I never picked up on that until, 30 years later, but I got there in the end.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did
Cool,
anyone
man.
else pick up on that?
No, I didn't.
No.
I really didn't.
This is definitely the first I'm hearing of it, but like it kind of highlights for me like just kind of where like Zemeckis used to put his priorities in movies was like in the small details. And not to say that he's lost it,
But he's lost it.
but he's lost it. I am still kind of like I'm always kind of hoping for like one more like genuine like Will Smith like hit like a classic movie. I'm kind of hoping that Zemeckis has got at least one more in him. That's
wanna
like
Hang on. Are
that
you saying
kind
you
of
want
movie.
you want Zemeckis to make Bad Boys 5?
Okay, well, the way they're going, space, sci-fi elements could be involved. We might need to investigate
Yeah.
this because
It's crazy to think Zemeckis didn't do or wouldn't have wanted to do like Ready Player One. I can see why he wouldn't, but
Mhm.
Yeah, because Spielberg goes, no, mine. I'm doing it.
yeah,
It's
I
all a-
guess
It's a movie about me and the way I make movies. Get out of the way. We're doing this
I
one.
guess.
Yeah.
Would it have been a better movie? No. I mean, what was his last? I mean, for me, the turning point was what, Forrest Gump, and everything after that. Like,
Because then he got into doing his animation. He got really
Yeah.
full tilt boogie into like, how can we make people scared with the uncanny valley? And
oh,
so
Polar
everything-
Express was like the
Polar Express,
Polar
no.
Express is, yeah,
And then also, what was the classic?
Oh, Beowulf.
Beowulf,
Beowulf.
yeah.
Yeah, and then like even most recently, he did fucking Pinocchio, which literally nobody
Yes.
saw.
Oh
and
my
now-
god, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
he
that's
did
all
the
good.
Steve Carell one too.
Well
the
done,
Marwin.
Marwin.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, okay, so now we've got Tom Hanks we've got Forrest Gump coming back. We've got Jenny from Forrest Gump coming back.
I was
We-
just going to say, yeah,
Oh,
this
right,
new movie.
the new one.
Yeah. So what is it called? One day, or all I know is, so Alexa, I go into movies blind. I don't watch trailers. I don't read up on them. I like to just not know what I'm getting into apart from just general buzz. But as far as I understand it, it plays out an entire relationship inside one room. And I know there is digital de-aging going on. So it's going to be
yeah.
young Tom Hanks all the way up
Yeah.
until now.
It's like their whole life. To my understanding, it's like their one house. So it's like they're gonna get, I guess, like get married by this house, and we're gonna see their whole life in the house.
And
Yeah,
once again, like what lies beneath,
Cool.
it will be $600 million.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm thinking. This has got to be super expensive.
Yeah.
I
Why?
just
For who's asking for this? Like,
that's yeah, like who's yeah.
read the room, Bobby.
Because okay, the thing is, I love a family drama.
Mhm.
I love a romance movie. I would in general like a movie like this to an
Sure.
extent. But like I think the issues about it for me and I think other people who would like movies of this sort of genre is that you're in it for the sentimentality and a lot of the sentimentality goes out the window when you see Tom Hanks's de-aged
Yeah,
face.
it
This
stops becoming it starts becoming like a drama wrapped in technology instead of the other way around. Even like Benjamin Button
Exactly.
to a degree,
Well, that's what
kind
I was going to
of
say.
like
Benjamin Button, like it's very good at pulling off the magic trick without you thinking. Because if you're thinking about the magic, it's Roger Rabbit
yeah,
again. If you're thinking about the magic trick, you're not thinking about the movie, then the magic trick hasn't worked. So that's going to
right.
be 100%.
Yeah.
If we're watching, so the movie is called Here. It hasn't come out yet, but that's kind of my fear, Alexa, is that I'm watching the movie and all I'm really thinking about is, oh, how'd they do that? Oh, it's de-aged, instead of just watching the movie.
But you won't be thinking about how they did that because you know how they did that.
Yeah,
And
and
it's just going
I
to
feel
stand
like it's
out.
gonna be like, you know how like when somebody has gotten too much work done and it's like they
Yeah.
can't emote anymore. That's what I'm gonna
Right.
be thinking is that like Tom Hanks's character is holding his newborn child and he's crying, but all I can see is like the glitching around his
Right.
eyes.
And the baby is animated and smoking a cigar.
Which is
There we
better than the
go.
one from
Give me a
American
toots.
Sniper, which is just Bradley Cooper moving a model baby. We'll go for that one as
well.
well.
Yeah.
Anything else, like quickly from Who Frames Roger Rabbit, like that we want to get into, like because we're talking about the whole sort of fictional city
Yeah.
idea. One thing I do think that is well realized is the production design of LA. With the trams going through, with the costumes, with the feel, with the vibe, and then multiplying that by cartoon, I think they do a great job of
Yeah.
selling the world. Again, you don't question it. You just go, you're just on board, and you're along for the ride pretty much from the beginning. Because I never felt distracted by it.
You're right. And I think setting it, I guess there's no other time period you could have set this movie in, really. Like that would have worked. Like I don't feel like you could have set this story in a modern day setting,
Like kiss, kiss,
like
bang, bang, but then add in cartoons.
Yeah. You couldn't set it in, say, a megalopolis.
Seriously, we're gonna have to do a whole episode just to talk about megalopolis. So I'm fascinated to get your take on
I
it.
could talk about it for 9 days straight.
Well, we're not going to do that, and in fact, so what we'll do, we're going to move on from Roger Rabbit. Let's head on over to a more pleasant place, depending on your perspective. Let's talk about Pleasantville.
A movie that I thought this like looks and feels like a Robert Zemeckis movie.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Like
I
was thinking that too. I'm like,
I am on board with that. It's got, the magical element. It's got, the magical remote control. It's got the special effects. It's got the kind of awareness of being a TV show, sort of like meta thing going on. So that's actually a very good point. It's written and directed by Gary Ross. Gary Ross, he also did the first Hunger Games movie. He did Seabiscuit and things like that. So it's like, this is one of his sort of first forays really into movie making. And it does start, the first 8-9 minutes are pure late 90s. It's the bit where we're in the high school, and that's the age I was when this movie came out. So I was 17, 18, when this movie's kind of like coming out. I'm in boarding school at the age, but in like that sort of age. But watching that opening scene of just clips around the school, and then the way that Reese Witherspoon's behaving, and then the hot guys come up and they're gonna watch MTV or whatever.
Oh yeah, the MTV movie awards.
It was something like that. It was something was going to be on MTV.
A concert, like a concert or something.
Yeah, and I was just like, wow, that's a snippet of my life. Like they nailed that sort of part.
Yeah, he's so watching like Nick at Night reruns.
But that was like my first like real kind of like issue with the movie is when he's like a teenage boy. Oh yeah, at the beginning. Right. Yeah, he's like watching essentially Leave It to Beaver, and he like huge fan and knows everything about it. I'm like, I'm sorry. I remember being that age, and I'm like, we're watching Dragon Ball and Jackass, and this kid is like, Oh man, I sure do love Father Knows Best. I'm like,
No.
no,
Okay,
no.
so hang on. I can counteract. Like, so you're a bit too young. You got to feel like he's my age, right? Like,
Mhm.
because he's grown up in a place much like I did, where you only had 3 or 4 channels. And so, if you don't want to watch the news and you don't want to watch horse racing, you're watching BBC Two, some random black and white show. So that's how I was watching The Addams Family, or watching The Munsters, or watching the Beverly Hillbillies. And it's like all these black and white shows that came out when my parents were young. I'm
Mhm.
watching all the reruns that come on during
Sure,
the day.
but Toby Maguire didn't grow up in like Soviet Russia. Like they it's a pretty suburban environment, so I'm sure they had access. They fucking had MTV, so there's no excuse
Well,
there.
I wasn't bougie like that. I didn't
Oh,
get cable until I was in college, man. So I was just,
true.
educated by the random channels.
For me, it was like he found this, and because you don't see his father character, maybe there was like a thing there where they grew up watching this show. There's more to it, that there was comfort in this show that his broken family couldn't provide, so he escaped into the like
There you go. All right. You nailed that one, because
fucking
that's
nerd.
exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's like, because yes,
Yeah.
you do get through context that the husband has left. The mum from Malcolm in the Middle, she's there, but she's going off like with her
She's
boyfriend.
straight up. She's like, I'm gonna go fuck. Like, yeah.
And then you've got Reese Witherspoon and Tobey Maguire, the worst twins ever. And then
Yeah.
the movie just goes off the rails.
I
But
do want to say, I do appreciate in the very beginning, you kind of get that like watching this from the 1998 perspective. You're like, he would be a good Peter Parker. Like I could see it.
Yeah.
You know, like
when he was announced as Spider-Man, people were like, yep, no,
yeah,
good choice.
because of this
Yeah.
movie.
We're like, yeah, he looks kind of like a dweeb. He could definitely be Peter Parker. I
Yeah.
buy it.
But it's like, it doesn't waste any time. So it introduces to Tobey Maguire, okay, he's a bit of a nerd. Introduced to Reese Witherspoon, by her own words, bit of a slut. But I'm like, but then that's so, we'll get into that later.
I like the conversations she has with it's her and her friends. They're all smoking cigarettes, and the boys show up, and it's the classic 90s conversation. Just like, hey, it's great.
Want to hang later? Sure.
Cool.
Cool. See ya.
Whatever. Yeah.
Bye.
That's it. Yeah.
But what it sets up is there is a Pleasantville marathon happening that night, and at the end of that, there's going to be a competition where you can win $1,000. Now, we mentioned Tobey Maguire obsessed with this show, but his twin sister, apparently, has organized for a date to come over, which has got nothing to do with watching MTV and everything to do with the fact that she's bought a new pair of underwear because she's horny. But for some reason, while they're fighting over the remote control, it breaks, and for some reason, a magical being turns up at their door. Don Knotts, in his last film role, apart from doing voice, rocks up, gives them a magical remote control, and then suddenly we're in Pleasantville. I mean, the movie just goes, and now this is what's happening. No explanation why, it just is.
I was thinking like, for some reason, you just saying that, like the Don Knotts thing was fucking great. He's a treasure, but it made me think of that shitty Adam Sandler movie with the remote control,
Click. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, it's kind of like that, but not really. It's like the core elements of it, but because you had Christopher Walken as the mystic who has batteries.
Though I will defend Click as actually being a better movie than people remember. It's actually a darker movie than
it is pretty dark.
Oh, absolutely.
I saw it in the theater.
But like, so we land in Pleasantville, and from this point on, we're just kind of like along for the ride. And I'm like, at this point, 'cause for me, the movie doesn't really fall apart until the third act, where it's like, oh, by the way, we're making a commentary on everything. And then at the end, nothing makes sense. But for the first hour, I'm on board for all right, this is.
Yeah, it's a fish out of water. Like, oh my God, they're out of their element. And Tobey Maguire like knows everything about this universe. And Reese Witherspoon is like, I'm gonna fuck Paul Walker immediately. But you get the sense that like Tobey Maguire's character is trying to reason with Don Knotts in the television, and Don Knotts is like, I've been searching thousands of years for you, boy. Like, what is his goal? Like, I don't understand.
I really did not understand his goal, especially by the end. I was like, I don't get what he was.
Has he been like cursed, and in order to release the curse, he has to get two other people into a television so he can be free?
Angry about
Wishmaster
Tobey Maguire because he likes the show. Anger about Reese Witherspoon changing stuff. Turns up throughout the movie, kind of irritated by it, and then at the end, they've completely broken Pleasantville, created an alternate dimension, and then he's just like, yay, drive
Like,
off
my work
credits.
here is done.
I'm free.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's
it's
insane,
it's
like-
literally like this, the end of that monorail episode of The Simpsons where he's
Yeah.
like, my work is done. You didn't
Yeah.
do anything. Oh, didn't I? And then he's gone. You're
Yeah.
like, well,
With a suitcase full of money.
yeah.
So,
Uh-huh.
Alexa, like, you know, your take on Pleasantville, like, you know, to begin with, because I think premise-wise, I like it. I like
Yeah.
the execution, like special effects-wise, I'm digging it. But from the outside, younger millennial, also person of color, this is quite
Yeah.
literally the whitest movie I've ever seen in my life. Is it impenetrably so?
I mean, yeah, it's a super white movie, but in the same vein, like Pleasantville is like, you know, Leave It to Beaver, and that was a super white show that I think like when it did have black characters on it, it was like a cause for this is national news. Like we're going to be talking about this for years to come.
Right.
So I don't know, like it's an interesting like B movie. I think it's representative of something that like doesn't exist anymore, of this like B movie where two young actors are like building their resume and putting themselves out there and proving themselves that hey, we can
Yeah.
like carry films. And then you know, I think this definitely is a somewhat forgotten movie in both of their filmographies, but like you said, this is probably like super important to Tobey Maguire later landing Spider-Man. And I'm trying to think of like when they come out, but like, you know, like this is all about Reese Witherspoon building this mythology that she built in the late 90s and the early 2000s that led her to winning an Academy Award. So it's
It led her to Sweet Home Alabama.
I mean,
Ugh.
yeah, like a movie as an Alabamian that I do still like.
Oh man, we
But-
had fun talking about Sweet Home Alabama.
What did we say that? Like that
I
was
don't
the
know if I remember.
that
It's
in
bonkers.
that movie
Yeah.
was the first movie released post 9/11, right? I think that was like
Yeah,
the big
that's
deal.
right.
Yeah. And
Um,
growing up,
somebody
like
had
as
to
a New
do
York,
it.
growing up like in New York on 9/11, we were all convinced that that movie caused 9/11.
Wow.
So,
But that was the
Look it
last
up.
straw.
Look at
Yeah.
it.
but to get into like so where Reese Witherspoon was, so she was still very brand new. I remember seeing her from the movie Fear. That's the one with Mark
Yeah,
Wahlberg.
Fear.
Mark Wahlberg.
Election for me.
Well,
Yeah,
that's the thing.
that's-
So Pleasantville's 98, but 99 was Cruel Intentions in
Oh
Election.
right. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Two-
okay.
Two wildly
big
different
ones.
roles. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
couldn't like
But it was like 2001 Legally Blonde. Now I'm skipping some
Yeah.
movies that she has sort of smaller roles in and stuff like that. 2002 Sweet Home Alabama. Legally Blonde 3 is 2003. It's 2005 is Walk the Line. And then from that
Mm.
point on, there's a lot of
Mud.
sort of like she's
she was
just,
in Mud.
yeah, Mud. But the thing is, yeah, no, because she just becomes a much more powerful person in Hollywood,
Yeah.
kind of post Oscar win and things like that. And then she's gone on to become such a sort of a great producer as far as producing content for women and about women and like, you know, being a force. But yeah, no, she's pretty new when she does Pleasantville, but she's great in this movie. I really enjoy her
Yeah.
in this movie. And like, I remember watching it because being frustrated by her at the beginning because she's breaking everything. And she's like, whatever.
Yeah,
Like,
she
I'm
just
gonna
does
go
not give
bone
a
Paul
fuck.
Walker.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Paul Walker, such a dreamboat in this movie. He is offensively attractive in this movie. And like, but the bit where he goes, I think there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
It's just
She was not
it's-
supposed to happen. Yeah, right.
and she's like, nuh-uh. And then she just jumps on top of him. And I'm like, it was funny. I liked bringing the 90s sort of sexually
Yeah.
awakened sort of woman in.
I liked her
into the-
breaking this world.
Yeah,
like
into Leave It to
that's
Beaver
great.
World.
Yeah.
And just like, you know, she gets all the teens fucking, and then she's like, teaches her mum how to, you know, mum, go run a bath and go diddle, and it's going to change your life. And
Why?
Yeah. And the tree. Why does the tree explode? I don't like. There's
Yeah.
like
It's really funny too, because like Pleasantville comes out, like you said, in the late 90s, but I think it feels more relevant now because like, okay, Tobey Maguire is this young man who's super obsessed with Pleasantville. And now we see a lot of like young Gen Z men who are like for the first time and since they've started tracking it, like Gen Z men are more religious than Gen Z women. And we see Gen Z men becoming very
Trad.
focused in conservatism and very trad, exactly. And like it would make sense that Reese Witherspoon's character, a woman, would come back to this like 1950s world and see like actually this isn't working for me at all. And I have to break it. And
Mhm.
so I do think that like
Yeah.
it's very interesting in that regard that at the end, Tobey Maguire's character has decided that actually now that a girl who would not have spit on me if I were on fire in a different situation is now wanting to date me, I think women should have free will.
Mm.
Mhm. Yeah, it's funny that that's the
Yeah.
thing that kind of snaps him out of it. And
And also,
I w-
I
I
just
was enjoying that aspect of the movie, and I was kind of hoping that we would stick more to that, but then we got a little too broad with like what we were trying to
the
fix as
idea
society at the end.
that they will this new society into existence, that Reese Witherspoon can now, there's a bus that goes to Springfield, okay,
Right.
and she goes to
College?
college, but also in this universe there's no toilets.
Right. So I was looking up. So that's actually kind of like a commentary
yeah.
on, you know, before then there were rules that you couldn't have a toilet in a TV show. It's the sense
Or the sound of a toilet.
you couldn't even
either.
have the sound of. Yeah. Okay. We read the same thing, but it was
Yeah.
like apparently it was Hitchcock in the '60s with Psycho was the 1st one. He literally went to the censor saying, no, I need the shot of the water because it's evocative of where we're
Yeah.
going to be going later on. But that's kind of like a little commentary. Is like. Because,
Yeah.
you know, in much in the same way, kind of like you were saying, Alexa, you know, it would be national news. You know, it's the same way that Kirk, you know, the first interracial kiss is Kirk in Star Trek. I found a way to bring Star Trek in there, buddy. But it's like, it's sort of commentary on that. But then honestly, I did spend the rest of the movie going, but what if they needed to go to the bathroom?
Yeah. It did, like, that's all I could focus. It's like the three seashells kind of complex. Like, it's all I could think about.
Right.
Did they will toilets into existence?
I guess.
Did they have to
Are the
explain to
toilets in
everyone?
color? Like,
You know?
what?
Because once people were no longer repressed, they could go to the bathroom now.
Right.
I guess
Right.
they weren't so anal.
Brought to you by Repressitol.
I actually would have loved to have seen the scene where like William H. Macy discovers they have a bathroom and is like, oh, and like a 10-minute scene of him trying to figure out what a toilet is and how to use it. That might have been
Thing for bringing
But
him
the
up, like
the entire time he's doing that, though, Joan Allen's in the background masturbating, and he doesn't even notice.
just taking a
See,
huge
now
shit.
we got a
Yeah.
movie.
The scene, the turning point scene for me was, I assume for most, was the bowling alley scene where William H. Macy goes and to
Yeah.
his men's group where they just go bowling, and he's like, there was no dinner, and all of them go,
Yeah. Yeah.
what?
It's Ben Shapiro's nightmare. Is
Crazy.
But that bit was great, actually. The bit, William H. Macy, I think, was perfect casting.
Yeah, he was.
He
very
does
good.
just give off.
He's got
that
face.
vibe. Yeah.
And so Joan Allen too.
Oh, yeah,
like everyone,
100%.
like
Yeah.
everyone cast in this definitely has that Leave It to Beaver kind of aesthetic for the show.
Mhm.
But the bit where he walks in and he goes, "Honey, I'm home,"
And it's dark, the
and
lights
it's
are
just
off.
like,
Yeah.
and the thing is,
Yeah.
the thing is, I mean, we all know them, and the thing is, you know, boomers, they're still around. We know boomers who are like this still, you know. And it was funny as fuck for me to watch this, picturing these other people that I know going, "Where's my dinner? I've come home. I'm sitting. No dinner has magically appeared," and I'm like, it's crazy that we're laughing about it in the 90s and it's 2024 and it's still less funny.
Yeah,
because
right.
it's more
And
real.
I think it's a good bit of world building too, because prior to that, you get Jeff Daniels' character, like he's like, well, you didn't show up, so I just kept polishing that. Like they're just so set in their program
Yeah.
that they can't deviate, and that was like another thing that. But also, he's like,
Never
now
got
he's
fully explored. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, it's a little sort of sci-fi Matrix idea that then it's like, all right, well.
And then like them shooting the baskets, like they've never lost a game, they never miss a shot.
Yeah.
But later on, when they're bowling, their score isn't like a perfect 300. That shot, I wanted to bring this up. The shot of the tracking shot moving left to right of the 3 or 4 7-10 splits, that was fucking nuts. I was like, how do they do that?
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It was, and JT Walsh, this was his last movie before he died, and he was always
good.
Just in every movie he turned up, he'd always be great, and he was always great in this particular role, the kind of malevolently evil, but just kind of like, just he's got a thing about him. In this particular one, like I thought, you know, he was great. It's like, we're safe, thank goodness we're in a bowling alley, you know.
Yeah.
But it's like he's just the idea of the, you know. But then, I mean, Ryan was the one that put it on the text thread, is like pointing out how Pleasantville is like still very relevant to today. Of we're getting books being burnt. We're getting, no, we can't learn about
It's
this.
unfortunately
we're getting,
prescient.
You know, we're in a time when you know, kind of like Alexa's talking about what's going on with Gen Z, but it's like, you know, in the 90s, women were like freer than they'd ever been. And we were in pre-2001. So we're all so just like excited and all this kind of shit. Whereas, you know, now we exist in a world where we're watching it and it's like, no, the daughters of today have less rights than their mothers did. But in this case, we had a freer woman going back to teach women that were repressed how to sort of like open up. And so that was my theory on another side. But I was talking to my wife about it. I go, that's my theory with why younger boys are pushing further right, is because these girls have had their rights taken away from them. But they've also been modeled on an idea that they don't have to settle. Because boys are still behaving the same way, which is just act obnoxious and girls will like you. But I play football and girls are like going, I don't give a shit. And they go, I don't understand. And so now you've got an entire generation of young boys going, where's my dinner?
Yeah.
My dinner's not here.
God damn it. So true.
I mean,
Yeah.
and that's Tobey Maguire at the beginning. He's like, our lives would just be better. Dad wouldn't have left if you were like this lady, if you were
Yeah.
this kind of mom.
That's what I'm saying. Like that, him growing up watching this show, like as a coping mechanism, almost to this show was his reality, and then being sucked into it, and it's like, oh my god, this is the best thing that could have happened. I was like, oh, it sure is a shame my sister's here to fuck all this up.
See, what I like is that we're finding the points the movie was making. The bad point is the movie didn't really make the points when you're watching it. It's when you sit down and you analyze it, you're like, oh, I see what they were trying to say, but they never quite say enough of what they're trying to say, if that makes sense.
It's clever. It is clever. Like it does make you, we're talking about it. It's making me think more about this movie than I ever would before.
Yeah, it brings up a lot of ideas, but it's not well crafted enough to like hit any of those points home. It just kind of more teases out these ideas that the audience can like then goes and can elaborate on. But it also, its like point of view and its moral message is a little unclear, because I also think like in the 90s there was a lot of society patting itself on the back with like, look how far we've come. And as we've kind of like gone back and reassessed, it's like, oh no, we really, because again, it's like making this message about like, oh, like liberation and like, you know, embracing all this in this movie full of nothing but like white Christian people, like from pretty much the top down. So from a very specific point of view, not including anyone else in the conversation. So
I just feel like it needed 2 or 3 more passes on the script to really kind of like, you know, hammer down what are we really trying to say. And it's kind of, I think Alex, you were the one that said it earlier, it kind of feels like they started making the movie and then kind of lost track of where they were. But that all being said, we also have to look at it through the lens of 1998. We have to look at the kind of movies that were being made. And yes, they were patting themselves on the back, but at the same time, I remember watching the movie going, oh, that's, I see what they're doing there. Race, right? Yeah, I understand this.
Yeah, the use of the phrase like no coloreds allowed.
Yeah,
like
seeing those signs, I was like, oh, come on.
Yeah,
hold up, buddy. Like, that is a choice. I don't know.
I'm sure when they wrote that in the writing room, they said, we're going to kill him with this one.
It's like in the writer's room, they were like, racism, not just for black people. And like, they're just like, it's fucking nuts. It's nuts to watch this through that lens.
But you know, it was a writer's room full of white guys.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, 100%.
Like, we did it, guys.
Women
so
and
nailed
black
it.
people are going to really appreciate us for this movie. Well done, guys. Take a raise. Take a raise.
It's just it. Like, I don't know if it's a product of its time. Like in 1998, like it's crazy to see. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, watching it now is like, it's weird how prescient this movie is, for worse. Like, it's not.
But that being said, from a technological filmmaking standpoint, very, very impressive. Like the moment when we go from real world to black and white is one thing, but it's the little magic trick of once we start adding color slowly into this, as they are waking up in whatever way they're waking up, the magic trick, you know, that's why I say, like, you don't see the special effects. When you tell someone it had the most special effects shots of any movie up until that point, and they go, what do you mean? I go, because they're having to either remove or add color. And that is not an easy thing to do, especially not in 1998, you know, using an Amiga with 90 megabytes. You know what I mean? It's like,
the idea of
effects, we're not exactly past it.
The idea of Joan Allen wearing like green makeup all over her face so they can like remove the color grading, and then for Jeff Daniels to like remove the green and reveal her actual skin tone was like, I'd love to. The one thing I didn't do with this, which I wouldn't mind seeing, is like a breakdown of how they did the visual effects for it, because it really is pretty special.
Yeah, there's a couple shots in here, like especially with the tree burning and stuff, and like
that's incredible.
Like where I am watching it, I'm like, it's breaking my brain a little bit, because I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't just we added color. There's like other things going on here, and so on like a technical VFX level, it's really really impressive. They definitely had to be careful with their shots, and yeah, even just when they did just colorize some things in a black and white image, even that alone is a really tough process. So when it got more elaborate than that, that's when I was really like, wow, this is
it seems like the courtroom scene too, where you have the wide shot of the people of the I don't even can't even say it without like it's like in the context of this movie, it's crazy to see the signs and everything, but you have the people in color up top and everything else is black and white,
segregated. I mean, they're being very subtle with it.
God, they reminded me of what's the courtroom movie we did about the monkeys.
Inherit the Wind.
That's the one.
Yes.
Yeah, that whole like courtroom drama scene. Like this movie is like really homaging a lot of other films. Like
God, I forgot about
the courtroom movie with the monkey.
Dunstan checks in. That's it.
I was here.
But like this movie again, because we're 2024ing this movie, and we're not wrong. We aren't. But
never.
It's like,
I want to go on record and say we are never wrong on this podcast.
But I still I think what it was, it's a good step. I see what they're trying to do, but what I really like is I wasn't really distracted by that in the 90s. As an 18-year-old, I was just kind of like, oh, I see what they're doing, but also just, it was a fun story. It was fun to kind of see them rebel. It was fun to see, the people kind of like open up their minds. It was fun to see that people did have their little journey. I remember enjoying the movie, and I did enjoy it.
I did, yeah. It's not my favorite, people getting sucked into a television movie. That belongs to Stay Tuned. But I did enjoy watching this movie for the podcast. Well, you're making a face. You don't like Stay Tuned?
I don't even know what you're talking about. What is Stay Tuned?
Yeah,
I have no clue.
Stay tuned. Oh my God! Anyone else? No one?
You said it, and I'm googling it. Stay Tuned animated series.
No.
No. There's a movie.
I'm seeing John Ritter.
John Ritter, yeah.
Oh, okay. I think maybe I do know about this because I think I saw a TikTok on this pretty recently.
Eugene Levy, Jeffrey Jones. Never heard about this movie.
Oh my!
Why didn't you pick it for this week's podcast?
Because it doesn't really take place in like a fictitious city. It's more of like
I think we also have like a 2-movie Jeffrey Jones limit, and I think we've hit that. So
he does play the villain though
in real life, and the movie,
1992. Never heard of that one.
Who's the director? Like, look at the director who did that movie and his run. It's pretty wild.
Peter
Francis
Hyams.
Ford Coppola. No.
Okay, hang on a second. So Capricorn 1, all right. Outland, 2010. The Presidio, Time Cop, Sudden Death, End of Days.
Yes.
Sound of Thunder.
On. That's my boy. All right, stop reading.
Now this is the greatest director ever.
Please, I can only get so.
I can't believe you guys have never seen. Again, it was just one of those movies that was like, not to derail this, but it was just on cable all the time, and it's. John Ritter's like, he's just obsessed with TV, and Jeffrey Jones, I think, plays the devil, offers him like this crazy satellite dish where you get insane movie like channels from all over, and he gets sucked into the television and is navigating this.
Okay, that's the trailer I saw on TikTok.
There's a bit like one's animated, and there's a Wayne's World bit, but it's called Dwayne's Underworld because this whole thing is run by the devil. It's fantastic. I should have.
How many drugs do I need to take to watch this movie? That sounds fascinating.
It's a great movie, and John Ritter's a fucking treasure. So,
but it doesn't sound like it has 2 Jean-Claude Van Dammes in it like Time Cop does. So I don't know. That's how I judge if a movie's good or not.
How many Jean-Claude Van Damme movies have 2 Jean-Claude Van Dammes?
More than you think.
It's Time Cop, and then Double Impact,
and then Double Impact, and then the show Jean-Claude Van Johnson.
Oh, right, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Banger. Anyway, sorry. What a
something
fucking
else I
tangent.
liked in the production design, Pleasantville, is that it very much leaned into the fact it's a film set. As in, you see, instead of them hiding the end of the street, it's just the end of the street. And
Yeah.
it feels very small while they're going around the town. Though a little fun thing apparently is like the house across the street is the house from Lethal Weapon.
Yes, I love that. Yeah.
Like,
I was watching this too because I remember watching Scarlet Witch. What's the Scarlet Witch show?
yes, WandaVision was
Yeah,
very
and
like this
Oh
yeah.
for the first 2 episodes. Alexa,
So
did you
much
watch-
so that I
did you
thought, I'm
watch
like, is it-
WandaVision?
What?
Alexa, did you watch
I'm sorry, what?
WandaVision?
Oh,
Did you
I
watch
do
it?
like WandaVision.
Yeah, because
Well, I don't know if I'm gonna. I haven't watched. It was Agatha All Along, like the spinoff, I guess you would
Yeah.
call. But I did really like WandaVision. I didn't like the Doctor Strange 2, where she was the villain as much, but I did
Mhm.
like WandaVision.
I like that of the first few episodes where it's set in that time era and it's black and white, and you're kind of getting this bit of
it's
If
very.
that was kind of the whole
Pleasantville-
show, I might have liked
yeah,
it more.
yeah. I agree. Yeah. But anyway, it just
Very
made me
pleasant
think of
villages.
Pleasantville. Yeah. Yes.
Oh
yes.
yeah,
I
definitely.
thought it was the same house.
I mean, it definitely has a lot of these same things because like themes, because in WandaVision, how she's using television in the same way to like cope with the emotional trauma of the situation.
Yes.
Yeah.
But like so we've been dogging on it a little bit. Like, Alexa, what's something you like about Pleasantville? What's something that when you're watching it, you're like, all right, not bad, well done.
Toby
well
Maguire and Reese Witherspoon are good at it. They're solid. I think it definitely has its funny moments in it. And even though we've all pointed out, the things it's attempting to do don't all the way come together in the third act, it's still a pretty decent little like sci-fi drama, definitely for like people who are probably around the age the characters are in this movie. And it's once again, like as we've all kind of also said, it's a solid movie to watch on cable, like on a Saturday.
Mhm.
There's a movie when you bring up to people, their response is usually like, "Oh yeah." They're not thinking about the ramifications of the subject matter. They're just like,
Right.
"Oh, that's the movie where everything's black and white and then it turns to color."
Color.
Yeah.
That's really it. Not like how or why that happens.
Yeah,
But
and nobody's ever like, "Oh, I hate that movie."
right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that you can think of sort of like the Wizard of Oz is kind of like you've got that kind of
True.
going into a different world. You've got the Truman Show as well with that
Yeah.
kind of like
We almost picked that too. Yeah.
living in a TV world. Though I'd say that they both do it better than Pleasantville. I mean, I think you're right. Pleasantville is like it's almost in the name. It's like it's inoffensive. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like it's a bit beige as a movie, but it's still pretty cool. But I think the most colorful movie, quite literally, in just sets and sound and costumes and everything else, and
The
swinging for
most
the fences.
2006 movie.
it's let's get to Idlewild. Finally, we saved the best for last in a way because it's the thing. This movie, like I said, had me sucked in from the beginning. And I will say, like, once we get to the end, it's like there are so many moving parts that for some reason the math doesn't quite math. It doesn't total out. The sum of the parts doesn't end up where I'm expecting it to be.
Yeah.
But I was so much enjoying the parts. There's just so much to it that I'm just watching.
I think I said on the text thread, I'm like, this is the first time I think the parts outweighed the sum for me.
Yeah.
Like,
but I understand exactly what you're saying because I'm watching it going, why am I not saying this is a 5-star movie? But why is everything going on screen something I'm agreeing with? And it's just...
I'm on board. I really enjoyed this, but it I know that's what it was. It very much felt like a music video that they're like, let's just turn this into a full feature,
Well, that's kind of what happened.
Yeah.
So the sort of the history of like of it coming together. I mean, honestly, actually, Alexa, do you know the history of this movie better? By all means, like, tell us.
Please.
I don't know too much. I just know, to my understanding, that like after they had made the joint album Speakerbox and the Love Below, that they kind of knew that they would probably be only making one for the last project, and that they wanted to do something really big, and that they were working on this concept album, and that it ended up growing and growing and growing until they were like, let's just make a whole movie that accompanies this concept album. And I think it's like a really interesting idea, especially as somebody who loves Beyonce. And when you think about Lemonade and Black is King, like Idlewild definitely predates both of those projects. And I think it's like an interesting evolution of the music video and music in general.
I was afraid it was going to be at some, like, you know, too much music video and not enough actual meat.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, I was surprised that there was not more music in a way. I
Yeah,
think it actually,
true.
for me, it was just the right amount. You know, it was kind of giving me vibes of Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, the scene, you know, Smooth Criminal.
Very much made me think of like a lot of Michael Jackson, like style music videos.
Because he would,
You know,
yeah,
like-
because he wouldn't just put out a music video, he'd put out a short film.
It was an event.
Yeah, and it's like it says 9 o'clock tonight. Make sure you tune in. BBC
Yeah.
One. We've got Michael
John
Jackson.
Landis was I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this one, like I was saying, from the very beginning, I really liked what it's doing. You know, like I said, it's the slight fantastical element of it without it leaning too far into it. I think was a nice way to sort of like get things going and kind of set up where things are, and especially like you were saying, the two leads really do. They're great.
Yep.
Like I said, Big Boy was the one that I was like, he's magnetic. I like every time he's on, and he's like Rooster, and he's on stage, and he's got so much presence.
You gotta watch ATL, another great teen movie that is about, you know, a group of teens in Atlanta, but Big Boy has a really good role in it as like a bit of a villain. And he also is great on an episode of Law and Order SVU where he's smuggling animals.
Are any of them roosters? That would be a fun.
You have in this movie, you have our second favorite rooster and also a character named Trumpy.
Yeah.
Trumpy. Yeah. I forgot.
Terrence Howard in this movie, just as Terrence Howard as it can get, is great. It was this was after God, what was the other Terrence Howard movie we did?
One that we did where he says, "Hey man."
Hustle and Flow.
That's
yeah.
it.
I even said to you guys, like, this is like Hustle and Flow if it had better music and didn't make me miserable. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it instead made it was likable characters. I'm even like when Rooster's cheating on his wife, I'm like, yeah, but he's a scamp. Like, come on.
Right. Weirdly reminded me. I don't know why it reminded me of Streets of Fire, just because that movie is just constantly rattling around in my head, thanks to Will.
Yeah.
But where this is like really leans into the more musical aspect, like that movie had like musical scene. I think it just really had one of the beginning and the end, whereas the music is throughout this movie. And I think the fact that like the songs are so disconnected from the subject matter that it makes it even more enjoyable. I don't know.
Well, it's exactly. I know what you mean. So that's what I was saying. That instead of they leaning too far into the music and it being like the music literally telling the story.
The music's not exposition, right?
It's giving you the vibe. It's giving you the feel, and that's what I thought. Yeah, I agree. I was like, no, this works. This works very well. It's like it made me appreciate that Baz Luhrmann's sometimes very heavy hand wasn't all over this movie. It was more like, let it happen.
It
like
did
the bit
kind
where
of.
They were doing, it's nearer the beginning and music's playing, and so everyone starts dancing, and they just had some wonderful shots of like just this incredibly theatrical and gymnastic dancing going on. And for me, I'm just watching it going, oh man, that looks great. You know,
this movie's a treat for the eyes. Absolutely.
Just imagine if they had $20 million more. That's my thing. Again, I want to bring back $10 million movie. I mean, Michael Jackson spent that on 10 minutes of his music video.
A lot of really great CGI work in this movie too. You even have like the Roger Rabbit crossover where he's talking to the rooster on his flask.
Yeah. It's fantastic. Yeah, I really found myself enjoying this movie like from the get-go. Like just from minute one, I was just like, I'm really into this. Like I'm really, really digging it. And I think the music not being like a literal translation of lyrics to screen, I think really helps to just sell like the vibe of it. It's not like a Men at Work music video where it's like literally everything he says in the lyrics is happening on screen.
It makes sense too that I think the music existed prior to this movie being made. So they already had some of these songs. So it probably wouldn't have made sense that'd have been even crazier.
But I like how they're still reflective of the time, and it also just reminded me
it fits and it shouldn't. Like this movie is a fucking mess.
Outkast, though, you know, they just blew the fuck up, and it was for everybody. Like, you know, so even when I was in England, you know, like at college, and Outkast was just it's all on MTV. Everybody's into it. We're all shaking it like a bloody Polaroid picture, you know, in the clubs and stuff like that. And it's like it reminded me, because I've missed Outkast, and it's been a long time
Yeah.
since I've kind of gone back to their stuff. And as soon as it started, and it's like, oh, their theatricality and their different approach and their way they bring it in. And in this case, it's so kind of like, you know, of the time, of that 20s, 30s vibe, combined with their outfits and stuff and their just general cheekiness.
And they couldn't be
Oh,
more,
God.
the two of them, personality wise, especially in this film, couldn't be more different.
Mhm.
Like you
Yeah.
have, it's crazy. Like their whole dynamic is very split down the middle, you know?
Yeah,
Mhm.
it reminded me of like how much I miss like them as a group and like
Yeah.
putting out music to the point of like, was it last Super Bowl or 2 Super Bowls ago, where Big Boy came out on stage and there was like a second there where I'm like, no, Andre's not going to come out too, is he? Like, and I was just sitting there like, but it didn't happen, and I was like, oh my god, that would have
What
literally
was
been the best thing ever.
Was it a tumultuous thing that caused them to a rift in their careers?
I think it was
actually,
just the
I don't know.
constant flute lessons really drove Big Boy insane, and just now because that's all Andre is putting out these days is
Yeah,
concept
I
flute
kind of think he
albums.
doesn't really want to rap anymore.
Yeah.
True.
Because I
Yeah.
think it's pretty obvious that like, because like for instance, I think they announced the other day that the Super Bowl would be in Atlanta again, like in 2028. It's always like, how much money could we give the two of you
Right.
to
Right.
like
Yeah.
to show up?
Yeah.
And I think they're also on the like Coachella wish list. Like there's several bands
sure.
that Coachella has offered, like, we will give each of you like $20 million or $50 million. And like they can't get them to reunite, can't get the Talking Heads to reunite. Like there's
Yeah.
just so many
Yeah.
groups that they're like, actually, there's just not enough money that
Yeah,
could get
true.
you.
You got to respect that at the same time.
Yeah, I
As
do.
much
Yeah.
as much as we'd all love it, because it'd be.
I don't
good.
think it could ever live up to that expectation
true.
too. That's
Yeah.
another thing, is this impossible dream.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this so this movie is like, it's also filled, like we mentioned, Terrence Howard, but we've got
What's the plot of this movie?
well, so essentially, I don't know. Well, it's just
Prohibition club.
Yeah, and we've got
money.
so essentially we've got a bit of gangstery thrown in as much as that sort of Big Boy, his as Rooster, he's kind of like a bit of a wheeler dealer. He's a performer, this, that, and the other in this club, which is being run by Ving Rhames, who is very much a sort of like father figure / gangster. He's also got Trumpy, played by Terrence Howard, who's kind of been his second-hand man. And just as it looks like that Ving Rhames is making his way out, Trumpy flips the script. Big Boy sees what's going down, and then it's kind of a gangster movie, it's kind of a musical, it's kind of a love story. It's all of those things kind of put in together without ever leaning fully into any of them, but giving us enough of all of them for it to make sense, I guess is the way of putting it. Like Paula Patton, like
Oh man,
she's so beautiful. But like,
Oh my
she
gosh.
comes and she's got so much presence in this movie. Patti LaBelle turning up as well. Like,
it's crazy.
pretty
This
cool.
movie has Patti LaBelle and Macy Gray and
Macy
as like
Gray.
side characters in this movie. That's
love
nutty.
Macy Gray. Like when she first
Mhm.
came out, right from the beginning, right early 2000s, I was on board. But what I like about it is whenever she turns up in movies, she's always just got this kind of
Her
the way
voice,
she
like no one
smokes and
sounds
the
like that.
anger
To,
and
yeah.
angst, and she's
It was a training. It was Training Day and Spider-Man.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
Spider-Man, she's just singing. But yeah, Training Day. She's
What was
just
the?
got this
I just
danger to her.
saw on YouTube Shorts, if you get a chance, look up Bill Hader is doing an interview where he does an impression of Sam Raimi talking to Macy Gray during her concert in
Yeah.
Spider-Man. He's like, "Yeah, Macy. So what's gonna happen is the Green Goblin's gonna come in." She's like, "I ain't getting no near no Green Goblin."
Yeah.
Something. It's so. I realize I'm doing an impression of someone doing an impression of someone else. So
Yeah.
it's lost, but
My God,
look
I would
that
have
up.
loved
It's
to have been on.
hysterical.
Would have been great to have been on that set. Just watching Sam Raimi try to explain Green Goblin to to Macy Gray. It would probably sound a lot like when I tried to explain Star Trek to Ryan. It's probably like the same. Just dead eye. Yeah, it's just disinterest.
Making me sterile.
Yeah, so it's kind of, so Andre 3000, he works in a mortuary. His dad is a mortician. He's, you know, we kind of through context pick up that, you know, a lot of his family's died, his mother died, that he's got things he wants to do. His dad's kind of unfulfilled and sad. Like I said, it's all kind of given to us. But honestly, it's a story that's propelled by the momentum of the music and the songs and the dance.
A lot of vibes.
Yeah, a lot of vibes. And then, you know, moments happen that are kind of feeling very evocative. Like I think Ryan, you said on the text thread that when I got that sort of that gunfight moment, we got very stylized, very made some stylistic choice. It's sort of Zack Snyder adjacent. The shot for me is the bullet being shot from the gun that comes out of the reflection of the eye, and then goes into the bullet impact through the door. I was like, nice,
really cool. But you don't get that throughout the entire film. You just kind of get it right in that one scene. You
well,
don't.
the other part was like the slow motion rain outside, Paula Patton and Andre 3000's little love scene kind of thing. So it's like but it works. At times it's borrowing. At times it's it's evoking. At times it's doing its own thing. But the balance of it works. I just wished it was. I just like I said. I wish $20 million more dollars and a couple more sets and a big theatrical release.
It felt a little. It felt very disconnected at certain things. Like that's what we were saying. Like the parts outweigh the sum, and it does all work. There's a scene where Andre 3000 is showing her from like a photo album of like all of the corpses.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's a thing, so I'm sorry, but that was like pretty funny to me. She's like, "Yep, dead too."
And also crazy that worked on anyone.
Yeah,
like,
she was like, that was her turn. She's like
immediately into him because I don't know if that is really endearing.
Yeah.
She then lies down on the slab going, "What would you do to me if I was dead?" And it's like,
that
in the very beginning when she's in the casket, it's like, actually, this is very morbid.
The amount of foreshadowing, spoiler alert.
There's a line in the beginning goes, "And that was the first dead body I touched." I was like, what?
Yeah, it's like immediately need a little bit more context for
but
that.
when I do it.
Yeah, it's I do think this movie, if there is a real definable flaw, it's that it felt like just structurally there might have been some things that like really could have been tightened up by somebody who like an actual or I shouldn't say actual, but somebody who's a more experienced screenwriter to kind of come in and weave these threads together, because a lot of things kind of drop out of the movie for a long period of time. And structurally, I was kind of waiting for Outkast to actually be a musical group, like in the movie, and that's not what the movie is. So
right.
I'm kind of watching it like with an expectation of like, well, clearly the answer for like how are we going to save the club is like the three of them or something form a group or like something like that. It doesn't quite get there, which is not a problem, but I think it does. I don't know. It felt like it was a little nebulous.
In a way, we talk about you're kind of weighed down by your expectation of it. Whereas I quite like the fact that we didn't go down that route. In the same.
Yeah.
But you were talking about Brian Barber. So it's written and directed by Brian Barber. He was a music video director. He directed a number of Outkast music videos, and he's kind of famous for sprinkling scenes from movies and TV into his videos. But for this to be his first feature film, wrote and directed, and he didn't get another one after this, I'm amazed. Because I'm like, look at this guy out of the gate, $10 million. This is the movie he could make? Why did he not get more work off the back of this one is something that for me is a mystery. Did
he then go back to directing more music videos? Because I'm sure this movie probably didn't do too well.
Well,
right?
It was a $10 million movie that made $12 million.
I guess
it was
on that
originally
budget,
going to be released on HBO, did get a theatrical release, so it did make money, at least, and he did. So I was reading here, it's just on his Wikipedia page, but he made a really hard push for the X-Men Origins Wolverine, spent 50 grand, motion capture stunts, concept art, storyboard, sound design, didn't get the job, but Fox was so impressed that they reimbursed him his money. And then never hired him for anything. That's the thing. Where is the second act of this guy? Because the one that we've had,
they went with Bryan
really
Singer.
good. That's the thing that I think is a mystery to me. Because
the set pieces in this look fantastic.
I guess I could see where the fear might have been on Fox to hire him to direct an X-Men movie, because then an X-Men movie might have been good, and Fox couldn't. They can't have that,
It was a good movie.
So.
Keep in mind too, this is an HBO Films movie that you cannot watch on HBO.
There's so many HBO Films movie you can't watch on HBO. That's honestly very upsetting. It's like a real sore point for me, because you should be able to watch Idlewild on there. And actually, the streaming service that it's on is Stars.
Stars, yeah.
That's so funny.
I rented it.
Who has Stars?
Exactly.
So Alexa, what was your first? Did you see this in theaters when this came out?
Yeah, I did. I like, I've always been, like a big Outkast fan. And as a kid, like me and my mom did go see this of of Outkast, but also because like it did seem like it was going to be interesting. I know like a good part we had just called the Coen brothers. We could have really tightened this script up because it
Ooh,
definitely feels like the bones of a Coen's brother
yeah,
movie in
it
a way.
sure does.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
so true.
and so it was a really fun experience going to go see it in the theaters because of how like it was beautiful on screen. And I do wish like that this would maybe even get like a second life on screen or something because like maybe for its 20th anniversary in a couple of years or something
Midnight
because it is
showings,
a
you know?
yeah, like
Yeah.
some midnight showings or something. It is a really fun movie that, like you said, it doesn't all the way come together like on the plot,
Mhm.
but for these like it's like these really fun little vignettes. Like the scene where Trumpy's character kills Spats and the other guy who runs church, like that whole section is
Mhm.
really good. The section honestly, I think all the parts with Rooster are probably some of the strongest parts of the
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even
I
For
like when
sure.
he's walking out of the club with the two women, and his wife is just down the end of the
Yes!
alley
With
with
a
a fucking
shotgun.
shotgun. Yeah,
What
It's
was
awesome.
what was the theatrical experience like? What was the crowd's reaction? What was the vibe in the theater?
It's like a little disappointing successful because like that day in the theater you would have thought it was a hit because so many in the theater were so excited and we're laughing and we're like singing along because like I know one of the songs near the end, She Lives in My Lap, had been a pretty popular like not it wasn't a single but it was been a pretty popular song on the Love Below. So like when that song came on, like the way people started to shout because of how like much they loved it. So it had a good theater participation when it originally came
like that.
out.
Yeah. This is one I've gotten to know some people who are involved with some of the film festivals around here in LA. And this is definitely one where I want to start bringing it up to them, be like, is it possible we could like get that? Cause like, I can just imagine this like at a screening and like fun to see in like a
You're gonna
packed
look
theater.
back at that like 10 years from now when Outkast are obviously reunited and touring and dropping albums, and Will's gonna be like, I did that.
All
I did
me.
that. I did
Yeah.
that.
But it's just as I was watching it, I'm like, this is so much fun.
Yeah.
I can't believe like it's not talked about more.
Well, I think kind of along those same lines, it has an opportunity to be rediscovered. I think that a sort of another theatrical release, or maybe, like I said, a 20th anniversary, like you were saying, Alexa, just like, I think there's an audience for this bigger
Yeah.
than the audience.
Just not relegated to Stars,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
or Hoopla or whatever other weird free fucking ad riddled streaming thing you have to access this movie on.
Tubi.
Yeah, exactly.
It should be on Tubi, where you can find other fine films like Scare Us, the horror anthology from 2021.
which Will may or may not have written.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Like it's just it's a movie that I think I think we're all kind of on board with. Is like it's a movie that should be talked about more. And I'm really happy that you brought this one
For sure.
to us, Alexa. This was a good choice. This was like it was a strong choice, and it was bang on as well with the whole like it's not a real place, but it's a real place, but it feels real, and it's like it's telling its story in its box in its
I think
sandbox.
you mentioned this earlier, but I think the marketing for this movie was the idea behind it was very different. Like it was marketed as this gangster, like darker toned film, whereas when you see it, it's this like hyper vibrant, exciting story, like this fairy tale almost.
Yeah,
and I think as well, it can't help but then be compared to things like we've been saying, Moulin Rouge or Michael Jackson, or that it's not quite doing enough of its own thing.
It's very
to be
homage-y,
its own thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of nods and tips of hats and homage, which isn't wrong. It's just it's existing in a realm where it's always being compared to something else instead of just purely on its own merits.
Well, why did it work for Roger Rabbit?
Actually, I was gonna say, like, what's funny is this director not getting another feature film,
Yeah.
I think is so interesting, especially when I think about things that are similar, like when John Landis would collaborate with Michael Jackson on things like Captain EO, which was like a $20 million short film, sci-fi masterpiece, went way over budget, never happened again. But like, it's so funny that guy, like, didn't affect his career in the least. But this guy comes out with a super strong, like, statement as a director for a first feature, and then goes nowhere.
I mean, what else was coming out in 2006? I don't.
Yeah,
I don't even know.
Let's look at top 50 movies 2006.
I think also what doesn't help is that the economy's bottom drops out over the next 2 years after this.
True.
Yeah.
Okay. 2006. Let's look at our top 10. Okay, see, this is again before we all got obsessed with like comic book movies. But we got number 1, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. 2, Cars. 3, this one's just for you, Will, X-Men: The Last Stand. 4, Da Vinci Code. 5, Superman Returns. 6, Ice Age Meltdown. 7, Happy Feet. We've got a George Miller movie. 8, Over the Hedge. 9, Casino Royale. 10, Talladega Nights. But this is also the year of The Departed, Night at the Museum, Inside Man. That's a great one. Not crazy movies. Brokeback Mountain, V for Vendetta, Miami Vice, Fast and Furious 3.
A lot, but you look at this list, a lot of big swings. Anything that's not like like a familiar intellectual property, but a lot of big swings on there.
I mean, even the thing is,
a lot of intellectual property. This is the beginning of it.
For sure.
Yeah.
But like even I mean, they're talking big swings. I want to maybe figure out a way of doing the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. But like the second, Dead Man's Chest is the second one. Those movies got so crazy. I know, but the thing is, I get it, but I also really enjoyed it. But they were the two.
Did they make any after the first one? I don't think they did. I think that was it. Just the one and done.
Second and third ones, I don't know. They just took a bunch of ketamine, a bunch of cocaine, and a bunch of mushrooms, and then just made the craziest fucking movies. And then they made $1 billion. It was a crazy time to go to the theaters, man. Those movies, I'm like, I think they are bonkers, just bonkers enough, in my opinion. Kind of like Idlewild, let's be honest. It's kind of bonkers enough.
A very gonzo type of film, like just wild. Like, I know we keep saying wild, it's in the title, but there's nothing idle about this movie.
Anything else you guys want to talk about from Idlewild? Like anything that's popping into your brains before we move on ahead?
Just
see this
Patton,
movie.
What are you up to these days? Like, are you free? Like, what's going on?
I agree. Paula Patton, when I really became like aware of her in Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol.
Yeah, same.
And I remember just going, well, she's gonna be one of the biggest stars in the world. She's got presence, she's got power, she's gorgeous, but like you believe her in those roles. And then she's not done nearly like as much as I figured she would have done.
That's all I remember her from. And then seeing this movie, I'm like, oh, that's the lady from Mission Impossibles.
Yeah.
And I really would have liked to see her in subsequent Mission Impossible movies.
Yeah.
Like
that was annoying because I thought they put together a really good team on that one. I thought she was a very strong member, and she just kind of like, I'm kind of hoping that they figure it because they've been pretty good with the Christopher McQuarrie takeover, bringing people back. She better be in the next one. You know?
They should bring her and Thandie Newton back.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Go for it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder if there's not like a really sexist, horrible producer in Hollywood who's like keeping her out of the business.
There's not just one. There's way too many. But yeah, the last movie she made was 2020, 4 Kids and It, a British fantasy film. The last big one was really 2016's Warcraft. But yeah, that thing, I think this doesn't make any sense. She's got literally... Yeah. She's got all 4 quadrants, and I think she can pull it off. I'm like, so Paula Patton, we support you. We want to see more of your movies.
Hopefully,
we're pro Patton.
Yeah. Hopefully she's not like visible in the business now by choice. It's something up to her. Hopefully, it's not like something worse.
Well, she was married
this
to
podcast.
Let's not forget that.
Who is she married to?
Oh, to Robin Thicke.
Robin Thicke.
Oh dear.
Yeah. And he then cheated on Paula Patton.
Which is so funny because like he got his breakthrough as a solo artist with the song that he had written during the time that she was filming this because he felt so jealous that she was working with Outkast and he was like, she's going to leave me for Andre 3000.
Mm.
And he wrote this song Lost Without You, and that's like was his first
Ooh,
big hit
boy.
as a solo artist.
Oh my
Because he
god.
felt like an outcast. Boom.
Yeah.
Full circle,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen. There we go. All right. Okay. So look, at this point, guys, usually at this point in the show, we try to sort of pin down which one of the movies really fully identifies with the state. Now, of course, that's not kind of what we're doing really in this particular episode. So I want to really get into which one of these movies do you feel like realizes their world the best? So in this regard, so like I said, we've got an LA, a 19 sort of like 30s, 40s LA, which is kind of like combined with sort of Toontown. We've got a world that becomes an alternate dimension. Apparently, like I said, we're confused about exactly what Pleasantville is. And then we've got sort of like the realization of Idlewild and its world and its costumes and everything else on board. Personally, I feel like we can cut Pleasantville out of this conversation. I think it's a two-man race. I'm open to people just
Hear me out though.
Okay.
Pleasantville 2 sequel idea. Reese Witherspoon comes out of the TV and she's like, Toby, we got to get back. Some kind of Back to the Future Part 2 scenario. Like, she's like, I really fucked up, man. We got to go. And they got to go back to fix the new Pleasantville.
Because
Right,
now,
so
now it's
gone to-
Hornyville.
They need to repress it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You're free.
Yeah.
It's basically become Toontown.
It becomes all about abstinence. I can actually see
Yeah.
the poster because they just take the two L's from Pleasantville and make it to the two.
Roman numerals. Yeah.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
sure.
Pleasantville.
Yeah.
But no, I
Perfect.
think because Pleasantville is what it is, but like, I almost feel like it
Yeah.
didn't quite know what it was doing enough that it's just.
How is it the most unhinged of these three fucking movies?
Right.
Yeah.
While at the same time being the most buttoned up. So for me, I think it's between Idlewild and Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and I've got my little campaign speech, and I like people to mix it up, but I'm going to throw
Fair.
my thing out here. That I'm leaning Idlewild because of what they did and how realized it feels for so little money.
Yeah.
You know,
And I think it also contextually feels the most like a real place that they just changed a name to.
Mhm.
Like it didn't feel like a made up place. It felt like a real place with a made up name versus Roger Rabbit, which I can't even believe I'm about to say this, somehow still with for as insane it is as it is, felt so grounded in building out this world that lives within this real world. So for swings, I'm gonna give it to Roger Rabbit.
Yeah, no, I could. You're. It's a really good
I
point
vote.
you make. Considering it's a world in which cartoons exist in reality, it's
You're like,
more
yeah, I buy it.
grounded than Idlewild.
Mhm.
What do you think, Alexa?
It's more
Go on.
fantastical. Like
Throw it
I
out.
don't
This is
know.
where she goes. I'm Pleasantville, all in. It's like,
Well, I'm gonna campaign for my own movie in Idlewild. I do think, especially at least on a world building basis, for two guys who had never made a movie before and who had, didn't have history degrees either. So it's not like they were pulling from this wealth of knowledge in how to make a movie or in what these towns actually were like. They do a pretty good job of creating this Prohibition era all Black town that is its own world within itself, which is what segregation feels like in general.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, so I do think they do like a really good job of creating a place that feels like, oh, there's an Idlewild museum. Like Idlewild was a real place that existed in 1930s Georgia.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Well, something we didn't talk about, but it reminded me, just as you're saying there, is that right at the beginning of the movie, they actually start off with some actual sort of black and white pictures or an actual newsreel as well, which looked like it was from Black Wall Street, like Tulsa kind of sort of like vibe, and kind of set that tone. And then it was quite clever about how they took those pictures and suddenly it starts sort of animating, and then it slowly goes from sort
Yeah,
of
that was
black
really
and white
cool.
to color to the movie. In that same way, it kind of sells the magic trick of already I'm like, oh, this is a real place, right?
Yeah, for
You know?
sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
and-
a good point. Will, okay, to you. So it looks like it's 2-1 right now for Idlewild. And this is like, he goes, my campaign is for Megalopolis.
One more thing about Idlewild that I just thought about is like, I'm glad that they didn't go the typical race route by having like the white club owner or something like
Yeah.
that. I'm glad that it
Has
was
nothing to do with anything.
yeah,
It's just
I
telling its
appreciated
story.
that for this movie. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's literally one white person in this movie, and they don't have dialogue, and it just sells Paula Patton
It was right at the end. Sells her a train ticket. That was like, see, there you go.
Yeah,
It did the one thing that Pleasantville couldn't do.
right. Yes, I think I'm also thrown in with Idlewild because for the assignment of like fictional city, it's it kind of avoids the problem that Roger Rabbit and Pleasantville both run into in terms of like their metaphors that they're going for, which is like when you start to kind of pull it apart, it's like, well, wait, what does this represent and what does this mean and how does this work? Where Idlewild, because it's an amalgam of Black Wall Street and like those those type of towns, it's pulling from that. It feels much more like this could have actually existed, despite that the movie is a musical and very flashy, but it's grounded in kind of that real American history that doesn't bump up against those problems of like, well, how does this work or how could this exist? It's like, well, we have examples of that. We know exactly how that would work.
You're right, because you can pull at the threads of Idlewild and it doesn't fall apart, whereas for the others, it's if you pull too much, suddenly things just stop making sense real quick. And it's like, great.
Oh, you mean the movie where a guy interacts with an animated rabbit? Sure. Yeah. Okay.
I think that's pretty solid. I don't know about you.
Okay, so no, all right, cool. So it looks like here, so the official United States of a movie that best represents something fictional inside America is actually the movie Idlewild, brought to us by Alexa. Alexa, thank you so much for bringing this to us. Like I said, it's always nice to get a new perspective. I thought you were fantastic. I love the way you look at things. You'd be welcome back on the show anytime you want. So we put the crown on Idlewild until such time as we circle back around next time to explore the world of fictional America. Before we move on, though, were there any other also ran? So like, I know, Alexa, like your three were pretty much the three that we chose, but were there any other sort of like fictional sort of like approaches that you approached or wanted to go down?
I did definitely do some Google searches on like fictional towns and stuff like in movies, but I do think in general these kind of operate as the best sort of fictional towns because whether they all pull it off or not, they are all trying to have a conversation about actual America through these fictional cities.
Yeah.
See,
all three of these movies are like trying to say something instead of just being like comic book city set here. Like that,
exactly.
Yeah, we didn't create this fictional city as not to offend the real city.
You're right.
Right.
I mean, that's a solid point, boys. I mean, the thing is, I think she makes a great point because then Ryan, like you said, is the only other way that we approached it was from the idea of, all right, Metropolis or Gotham, but that's a whole other thing. I mean, can anyone, Will, you as our resident sort of library of movies, what about you? What are some of the ones that we're not thinking about, or have we just nailed it?
I was gonna suggest maybe Paris, Texas, because come on, there's no place that doesn't exist.
Texas isn't a real place.
Yeah, Texas isn't real.
I was gonna go.
No, I just had it. I was thinking there was I was toying around with the idea of throwing out the Simpsons movie for Springfield, but ultimately I'm like, that I don't know, because that's more of it. Even though they did a Simpsons movie, it felt a little bit like a cheat. It felt a little bit like that's really a TV show thing. That's really so I kind of nixed that idea pretty quick.
Yeah, I had the Alex Proyas movie Dark City.
Dark City, yes.
Oh.
Yes. That was one Mrs. mentioned as well. That would have been, that's one of my favorites.
Or you get like The Matrix. Like once you dive into this kind of techno kind of world, another one that no one's ever seen was The 13th Floor.
Yeah, well, the thing is, you've actually just, with The 13th Floor, of course, that was the other one that was like The Matrix, which is like Dark City, which, let's be honest, we've just named another special that we have to come up with at some point. They're all thematically very, very similar movies, but they're leaning into the sci-fi. So honestly, I think we accidentally found the three perfect ones, which really
the overlap is wild.
It's wild how that worked. So before we move on to the end of the show, where we're going to go next week, I'll tell you what, be surprised if Will starts crying happy tears, because I've decided we're going to do the United States of space.
Oh,
Mhm.
3 Star Trek movies. Let's go.
So we're going to go to the
I'm
United
actually
States.
unavailable next week.
There's a whole universe of things to explore here. Are we going to be going 2001 Interstellar? Are we going to be going Fast and Furious 9? Are we going to be...
Oh my God.
Where are
Oh
we going to
God,
end
no.
up? Tune in next week to find out. But before we get there, Alexa, how can people find you if they want to hear more about what you think about movies?
You can follow me on TikTok or Instagram at Alexa Recommends. I recommend classic movies, especially based on taste of your like current movie loves. I do movie recommendations and in general just love to talk about different movies.
So make sure you
Yeah.
drop her a subscribe. Don't forget, you can also find Will doing very similar sort of approach with Entitled Millennial, where he likes to stand in front of his massive wall of Blu-rays and select movies that you maybe have never heard of that you might want to watch as well. You can find me as That Englishman in Texas or on Facebook as Ollie Pettigrew. Very often on a Monday, I'll be talking movies, usually about our podcast. But other than that, I'm usually talking about and observing just the craziness that is Texas. And when it comes to Ryan, he's probably right behind you right now. He's never following. You can't follow him. He's following you. But you can also find his incredible movie-inspired designs. He likes to reimagine movie posters, as well as designing T-shirts, as well as creating copyright infringement situations with Warner Brothers.
Well, hey.
But you can find them all as Rhino Digital, R-Y-N-O Digital. He's on Threadless, he's on Etsy and things like that. Don't forget, you can also join in the conversation with us on our Facebook page, The United States of a Movie. We've also got a Reddit as well. But basically, we love it when you do reach out. We love it when you've got comments, and we love it when you tell Will how wrong he is about not liking Twister. So please be sure to reach out and have fun. So from me, from Ryan, from Will, and from Alexa, thank you so much once again for joining us for this episode of the United States of a Movie podcast.